right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you may be. Thank you for joining us. Another episode, catching up with Jacob. And here he is, the epicenter of all that's going on in Tennessee, Jacob Prash.
Blessings in Jesus, dear friends, wherever you are. No matter what country, no matter what state, no matter what city, we are all one in Christ and he is coming.
Thank you, Jacob. God bless you. And Elon, another place, epicenter of a lot of stuff going on. Not a lot of banks today, but plenty of news. How are you, Elon?
I'm very well, thank you. And evening all to everybody.
Yeah, good to see you again, brother. God bless you. And Southern California, here's Jay. How are you, Jay?
Recovering, but doing well.
Yeah, I heard you got the hantavirus. Is that true?
I hope not.
I'm kidding. No. We will talk about the hantavirus in a moment, but he's doing well and he's getting better. Thank you. So thank you so much for being with us, Jay. And Davey, how are you this morning in Australia?
Yeah, pretty good, thank you, and good to be here with you guys again this Saturday morning or Friday for you guys.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, huh? It's already another week, and it's already May, and it's we just had April, and it went fast. Now it's May. For those who joining us live, we welcome you in the name of the Lord from YouTube to Vimeo to Telegram to Rumble to X. To our own website, moral.tv, to moraltv.org, and many other sites. Facebook still going on with us. So welcome in the name of the Lord. And there's lots of things we got to jam-packed full of news and information that you need to know, because we need to look at all these things from a biblical perspective. There's lots of things that are causing tremendous fear in the world. But Jesus said, don't fear. These things must take place, but the end is not yet. So we must look at this through the words of Jesus, through the lens of Scripture, and to have a sound mind. So we're going to have to do that by all that we're going to share today. We got a couple of announcements. I'll turn it over to Jay. Jay, you can go through the announcements.
Sure. So first of all, I wanted everyone to know that Christoph's album, I believe there's hard copies of it now available with Morio UK site. So if you wanted to buy an actual CD, definitely hit that up. Also, I have given Mia a few copies of my albums in hardcover CDs, and they are now on the Memorial store. Lastly, I wanted to make sure that we asked on Memorial.org in the shop, we have these beautiful t-shirts that will, if you buy some and wear them, people will be able to go and check out the movie Why This Time Is Different. So, we've worked with Babylon Bee, we've worked with other people to advertise the movie. Now we'd really appreciate if we could work with you. Every time you wear the shirt, you're actually pointing people to the movie and hopefully pointing them to hear a gospel presentation. So we would love for you to help support us. We have extra large all the way down to small. They're on the memorial.org shop. So please, if you can, buy a shirt, wear it out, especially if you're going out in public. Pass out some tracts while wearing it. It's even better. Finally, I wanted to make sure that everyone was aware now, Morio UK now has a card machine so they can take payments over the phone. In case you didn't want to go online or use PayPal, they can do it directly over the phone. On top of that, they are now offering DVDs of both Jacob and Marco and other speakers teaching on DVDs. So again, if for those that don't want to go on the internet and actually pull this stuff down, it's available on Morio UK.
Jay, one question.
Awesome.
Your album, is it available in vinyl?
Actually, if you'd like, I make a special order for you and ship it if you'd like.
Yeah, that'd be great. Jay, it's interesting. I've been watching a lot of surveys and news. I keep an eye on those stuff, especially what society thinks. And one of the trends that's been happening, I think you and I talked about, is how many young people are going back to actually hard copies, CDs, DVDs, because they're tired of not able to own certain things like we used to. When I grew up, there was no other way but to go to get a CD, or when I was a little bit older, you get a DVD. I wasn't much into Blu-ray, but I had tapes, CDs, and DVDs, and you actually own it. You didn't have to pay for a subscription, and kids are going back to that. And it's quite interesting that never and hasn't gone out of style.
No, physical media is going to be very important in the future, I think, especially with some of the streamer services taking over like they are. People have copies, they'll always have them available. Things drop off of Amazon, they drop off of Netflix, but if you have the copy, you're just a DVD away. One last piece of business.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
As you know, we are running a promotion, the Gingo to Bingo music giveaway. We are going to ask a question this week, and the first person to respond correctly on both YouTube and on Rumble will be able to have a copy of the album of their choice on Moriel.org's music site. And the question is, what psalm is Jacob's favorite psalm? Good luck.
So, Psalm from the Bible. It's one of Jacob's favorite psalms. So let's see what people say.
There's actually two. We'll accept either one.
Okay. All right. I have my guess, but I won't say I'm not allowed to participate because I know too much.
Okay.
That'd be unfair.
That would be unfair. Well, it's interesting how many things are changing, and the way things are going, you're going to need it. You're going to need the Word of God. You're going to need the Word of God in your heart, and we got lots of stuff to share. And I think, Jacob, you're heading to Canada next week.
Yes, we're going to be in conference near Winnipeg, and I fly up on the 14th, I believe, returning on the 19th. The details are on the Moriel website itinerary page. We shall be in Winnipeg. Please come see us.
And
It'll be my first time in Canada since COVID. My first time back in Canada since COVID. If Mr. Carney does not have the Mounties intercept me.
And the way things are going, better get in quick. You better get in quick. Yeah. So let's catch up, and a couple of things to little tidbits of information. Jacob, we'll start with you. This is just real quick. Legendary prosperity gospel word of faith preacher, televangelist, one of the first ones, Marilyn Hickey, died last week, 94 years old. And yesterday, Joni Lamb, co-founder of Daystar, passed away. Jacob, your thoughts on this? I give you my thoughts, but who cares? This is a great warning to all those who know what these women were about, because they were not just benign. They had some really, really, really terrible doctrines that were infiltrated into the church. Your thoughts on Hickey?
They both did. Marilyn Hickey may have begun right, and she did have a combination of valid teachings and invalid teachings. Yeah. Problematically, of course, her ministry was not only focused towards women. It became a thing where she was just teaching the body as a whole without her head covered. She was problematic. She made it to be quite old. But Miss Lammy is another issue. Daystar may have begun right, but it became riddled with scandal, false teaching, false doctrine, and she was one of the figures in the epicenter of it. She was not that old. She was not an old elderly person.
No, 65.
65. Okay, she just barely retirement age. Again, I don't take any delight in her death, but I do recognize the problems in Daystar, and she was partly responsible for much of it.
Yeah, she co-founded it with Marcus Lamb, and they had they gave platforms to a lot of false teachers. Jesse Duplantis,
a lot.
Copeland, Dollar, Baker, obviously Perry Stone, Joel Osteen, Creflo Dollar, Prince, T.D. Jakes.
One false teacher after another, and she and her husband were responsible. But then there were issues between them.
Yeah, and then you had the scandal that really kind of broke Daystar last year, that even Joyce Meyer had to step away from Daystar because it was getting too hot, and it was about the granddaughter and some of the things that have transpired with the granddaughter protecting what seemingly was a molestation of some sort. We don't know exactly all that there's to it, but the granddaughter.
If Joyce Meyer has to step away from you, that would be like Jack the Ripper having to step away from you because you were too violent.
Yeah. So, Jacob, a new era of Christian TV is dawning upon us. What do you think the future of Christian TV is going to look like?
I hope it looks nothing like the one we've already had. I hope the legacy of certainly TBN, which again began right, but quickly went off the rails with the Crouches. Well, obviously, what Jim and Tammy Baker did, and Daystar, and even and CNN, Pat Robinson's actions cannot be justified. He was a false prophet. He ended a false prophet and a man who gave sanction to counterfeit revivals and other things. So, whatever the future is, I pray that it will not in any sense resemble what we've had. Satan has used Christian TV to discredit the gospel. I believe Satan has gained more from Christian TV than the legitimate work of Christ has. It's done more damage to the cause of Christ than it has good. On a technical level, I believe it'll obviously be much more digitalized and internet focused as opposed to what it was in the past, either analog or satellite focused. So there'll be technological differences. I don't think that it will be able to compete effectively with YouTube, Rumble, and individual websites. What you're seeing in secular news and broadcasting, where the networks and so forth are having to compete with just people having their own channels. In the future in the church, I think there's going to be the same thing. You're going to have people coming to everything from Moriel to Mike Winger to these alternative, Joel Richardson. You're going to have people going to these alternative platforms on the internet in juxtaposition to Christian TV. Personal channels on the internet, I think, will have already created a viewership challenge to anything that can present it as a unified programming platform. So I don't think it's going to be what it was or achieve the status it once did. Too much of it has gone awry. Revelation TV in Great Britain, TBN, obviously, CNN, PTL Club, all of these things, Daystar, they ended badly. Whatever comes now, I hope it does not end badly, but I don't think it is going to be competitive in terms of, I hate to use the term market share, but let's say viewership with the independent channels available to all of us. What do you think, James? I'm interested in your comment.
I mean, I think the time of network TV and cable TV is starting to come to a close. I think that YouTube is the future. I think independent voices on social media is really the future. And it really will depend on how these social media companies become part of the, let's call it the landscape of the streaming culture, because that's what that's where it's going. I think you might see almost a consolidation between like Netflix and Amazon, and then possibly social media platforms in the future. I think it's not out of the realm of possibility, especially when you take into consideration like these, even when we're talking about religious channels, these Christian channels, there's already a parity with, let's call it the corporatization of religious thought when you have things like PureFlix, you have things like the Chosen Studio. It's escaping
Angel
me
Studios.
Right now. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Angel Studios. You're seeing that they are trying to turn it corporate, but I don't see that with X. X and YouTube are such larger platforms than anything that's organized.
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously add the idea of the complexity, of course, of restriction and censorship. A lot of these things are very murky waters to navigate. Jacob, one more thing.
James, what you're saying is what we saw happen, like with ex-Fox people, former Fox people like Tucker Carlson, or even Megyn Kelly to a degree, surviving on their own channels, getting a bigger viewership than they got when they were with Fox.
Yeah.
There's going to be a Christian equivalent of that.
I do see that. I see that
Yeah.
I mean, right now, the big money, if you look at the production value, is obviously with things like the Catholic Church, but
Yeah.
they have a relatively small segment of audience. Um, these the gospel centered like prosperity movement, they already are making that shift. The question is where do ministries like Moriel and other ministries that are actually speaking the truth, how are they going to do the same thing and get to the same audience? And you might
Yes.
see like a little bit of an alliance between, let's call it the political right, maybe commentary, and religious right coming together.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Just maybe I
Jake,
can
yeah,
interject on this just very quickly.
yeah.
You know,
Let's do
a
it
lot of
quickly. Yeah, let's do it quickly.
those false prophets and prosperity preachers, they're on God TV, and you can see them here in Israel actually. And I think what's her name? Not Marilyn Hickey, the other one, other woman that Jacob mentioned her before. She's on
Lammy,
Shalanu TV. Sorry.
Joyce Meyer.
Joyce Meyer, yes, you can see her on Shalanu TV, which was set up. Well, the head of Shalom TV is the CEO is Ron Cantor, or at least the last time I looked, anyway. And Shalom TV is an offshoot from God TV, so you have some of the same elements there. So that they're still hanging around like a bad smell. Those
Yeah, Ron Cantor
word of faith
is,
preachers.
NAR Tikkun.
Yes, he is part of Tikkun. Yeah.
All right, let's move on from it because that took a little bit longer than we expected. So anyway, let's get into Israel and Iran. Jacob Prash, U.S. and Iran exchanged fire in the Strait of Hormuz. Three Navy ships, U.S. ships were targeted. They were not hit. Trump says we retaliated as a love tap, more than that. But your thoughts on the fire in the Strait of Hormuz?
It was more than a love tap. The Iranians had to do that for domestic consumption to try to show that they had some kind of an active, viable response to the American escort of tankers through the Straits of Hormuz, and that they had a viable military response, which they didn't. It was largely something they did for internal propaganda purposes among their own population. But they did launch some attacks on the Emirates, apparently, on some of the Emirates, allegedly even Abu Dhabi.
UAE.
Yeah, Kuwait and Abu Dhabi. So there are definitely saber rattling. But Mr. Trump's response was firm and effective. Two days previously, the Americans sunk 6 of those fast boats that were harassing shipping when they attacked. And this time it was a even more rigid response to what the Iranians did. He's let them know he's not fooling around. The question is, politically, how much longer can he leave this situation unresolved because of the impending midterm elections in the United States? The Iranians want to drag it out. He wants to cut it short. He's got to take firmer action than he's taken. One of the things I've thought suggested should happen is the Americans should say, if you fire on any American ships, we're going to destroy Karg Island. And the Israelis should say, if any more missiles fired from Iran land on Israel, we're going to destroy Karg Island. Handicap them. They don't want that to happen. They really don't. The regime doesn't care what happens to their own people, but they do care about their own economic survival. And Karg Island is their vulnerability. I think the Trump administration and the Israelis should both play that card. So should the Emirates, for that matter. I'd also point out that both Kuwait and Saudi Arabia have reopened their air bases and airspaces to American fighter aircraft. They were offended when Mr. Trump played down the original attacks that happened several days ago on the Emirates and Saudi Arabia by saying it did not rise to the level of a full-scale violation of the ceasefire, and they were offended. But now it's been resolved, and that airspace is again open, and access to the air bases in Saudi Arabia is re-provided. So Iran is not in a good position. But Mr. Trump, if he plays this long, he's not going to be in a good position either. He needs to move and squeeze them economically, and he needs to make it clear we will hit Kog Island. Another thing he did was he hit their second biggest oil port. That is important. That is the most important thing he did in terms of impacting Iran. He hit their second biggest port of oil export. That is significant.
Yeah, Jacob, we'll get to the economy in a moment, but they're going to resume escorting ships to the Strait of Hormuz. This is the U.S. Navy. And of course, that thing is heating up again, the Strait of Hormuz. You think this will escalate, de-escalate, or are we just going to have a stalemate and then just one of these things bleep up here every now and then?
The problem is we don't know who's really controlling Iran beyond the Revolutionary Guard and to what extent they're united. It's difficult because one, they're in a corner, they're cornered, and two, there's no clear-cut single person in charge that we can be sure of. So it is. I don't say it's completely unpredictable, but you're working odds. You can't calculate a statistical likelihood of what's going to happen with any definite projection. It could go either way.
Yeah, we've constantly said here that there's four factions within Iran that it's, any one of them could be leading. One is the RGC, the other one is the theocrats and mullahs. Of course, you got parliament and you have the army. And even within the IRGC, there are factions within the IRGC that don't agree with each other, and they shoot randomly. Like one example, they actually struck a Chinese alliance ship this week. And
that's correct.
And China was very upset with that, but the IRGC was like, well, we didn't know. Who hit it? Why did they hit it? And of course, the ambassador Argachi was in Tehran. Then he went to Beijing to kind of sort of perhaps smooth some edges there. Jacob, I wanted to ask you this. Yesterday, we were watching the oil prices when this exchange of fires were going on in the Strait of Hormuz, and you can literally see it beep beep going
up and down like a yo-yo.
Yeah, so it rose about 3% as of 6:30 last night Pacific time. Where do you think this is going to settle down in as we get into the summer months? More driving, more oil consumption?
The first thing we have to understand is in the greater chess game, it is not a chess game between the United States and Iran. It's a chess game between the United States and China. The Iranians are the pawns. The Chinese are the rooks, the bishops, the knights, the queens, and the king. The Iranians are the stooges in a greater chess game from the perspective of Mr. Trump. Chinese reliance upon oil. They've been badly hurt by what Mr. Trump did in Venezuela, and now there's a problem with the Straits of Hormuz and the Iranian oil itself. So that's the first thing that has to be understood. It has to be viewed in the broader context of the bigger chess game that Mr. Trump is playing. I do think that you're going to have high oil prices in the summer for the summer driving months and vacation seasons. That is politically detrimental to Mr. Trump heading towards the midterms. He's got to get this thing over with and get those prices down as quickly as he can. And I don't see any way he can do that other than giving an ultimatum that will scare the Iranians. That, look, we are going to go for Kog Island. We are going to destroy all the bridges and power networks. We are going to damage the already under-functioning water supply system to the cities. Now, he's been handicapped in his capacity to do that because he doesn't want to hurt the Iranian people who are against the regime. And the regime knows that. They don't have a problem murdering their own people by the tens of thousands. They know Mr. Trump does not want to do that. But at some point, he's stuck between a rock and a hard place in this quagmire. We don't want to hurt the people, but we've got to make that regime acquiesce to the 6 essential demands. The first is denuclearization, international inspections, and removal of fissionable material. Secondly, a halt to construction of ICBMs. Third, a halt to the provision of drones, the Mr. Truth that are designed and manufactured in Iran. Fourth, the human rights of their own people. Fifth, an end to sponsoring external terror with Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. And 6, leave your neighbors alone. Not only the Emirates and the Saudis, but the Israelis. Now, those are the 6 non-negotiable terms that Mr. Trump must give, not as a negotiation, but as an ultimatum. You cannot negotiate with the Iranians. You must give them an ultimatum.
Yes, absolutely. Jacob, I wanted to ask you this. The CIA, the intelligence agencies, warned, and they leaked this out to the Washington Post. So there's dubious at best. So put it that way. Put that aside.
Yes.
Dubious at best. It was leaked out that the deep state believes that Trump is wrong, that Trump's been lying, that Iran can outlast any Trump blockade. They have enough material, and they have enough missiles, they have enough food, they have enough water, they have enough energy, and that Trump has been selling basically a bill of goods that's not good for the American people. This was now posted by the Washington Post, claiming that it was from intelligence agencies, leaked to the Washington Post. Your thoughts on that? Are we getting the right information, wrong information? What do you think it's really happening?
The problem is much of this was epicentered around Joseph Kent, who resigned in March as the director of the counterterrorism center. He had been at various times a pro-Trump conservative Republican. Other times he supported Bernie Sanders. Who knows what a time.
What a swing.
But he has been accused of leaking or suspected of leaking by the FBI, and it may be coming from him. He has taken a firm anti-Israel position, saying that Mr. Trump went into Iran when it didn't really pose a threat to the United States at the behest of the Israelis. That was his claim, and he did so as a Trump appointee in 2025. So this has been a problem, and that is where that is coming from. I do think, however, that all of that needs to be viewed in the overall context of what I've been saying, the war on terror. The war on terror mandates that the United States is justified in attacking anyone who engages in terror, aids and abets terror, supports terror, or threatens terror against the United States. And there is a firm legal basis for doing that concerning Iran, based on the amount of Americans they've killed, based on their continued threats. So within the war on terrorist provisions passed by Congress and signed by Bush, it is a perfectly valid military action. I think that the truth is somewhere in the middle. The Iranians pose more of a threat to their own people, to the Emirates, to the Saudis, to the Israelis, and to the Europeans. They pose more of a threat to all the other 5 interests than they did to the United States. At this point, had they managed to achieve enough fissionable material to make a bomb and a delivery system, eventually, they would have been a threat to the United States. And that was preempted. That is the situation. I don't think it was a question of imminency in terms of its threat to the United States, but I do think there was a potential imminency with its threat to its immediate neighbors and to Europe. Those missiles can reach Europe. The ones that they fired at Diego Garcia prove that. So that's Europe's problem, of course, but with America leaving NATO, et cetera, but it was a legitimate threat. So I think that the Trump administration has overstated the threat to the United States, but they've not overstated the overall threat. And I think there is a legal basis to do it.
Now, going back to what the report actually says, and going back to what Israel actually says, so there's something in the middle here. Former Israeli NSA says that, yes, we have devastated, along with America, about 60% of the ballistic missile stockpile at the beginning of the war. So it's not quite what this leak is saying, but it's also not quite what Trump is saying. So perhaps in the middle is where the IDF, the Israeli NSA and the IDF are mentioning that they have hampered it, but not to the degree that maybe Trump is saying.
The first casualty of war is always truth. We know that.
Yes,
It's always
absolutely.
been like that. The first casualty of war is always truth, and the actual factual truth is somewhere in the middle.
Now, regarding the economy of Iran, and Jacob, this is part of the what the former prince, or what he calls himself, the prince, Crown Prince Reza
Son of the
Pahlavi.
Shah.
Yeah, the reality is that there's going to be a lot of protests this weekend scheduled for Saturday and Sunday throughout the world against the RIGC because the way they've handled the people, the way they've executed people, the way they arrested people. There's no internet. The infrastructure seems to be almost done within
Yes.
Iran. And this is about nearly 70 days since they've had no internet, very little access to any kind of communication, and there's going to be a lot of protests. Now, within Iran, we hear conflicting reports. Obviously, the intelligence agency says, oh, they have plenty of food, plenty of energy. The people are protesting saying we don't. So there's something to say about what the people are actually.
First of all, these protests being orchestrated by the son of the Shah will be for international consumption in the international media. It will not have much impact in Iran. The media is controlled and the internet is down. It will not have a big impact internally. It may have some, but not anything that's going to be transformative. Secondly, and more importantly, the regime do not care about their own people. They only care about their own survival and their own religious ideology. The Mahdiism and the Mahdiism, Mahdiism, that's all they care about. They don't care about their own people. If their own people die, they'll simply say they were shahadi, that they died for the cause of Islam as martyrs in a jihad. That's how they will reconcile any problem that they have domestically or internally. They just don't care about their own people. So whether or not they have adequate food supplies or not is immaterial. They don't care. They just don't matter. However, assuming that they do have adequate food supplies, their water system is very fragile and very inadequate. It would be quite simple to destroy accessibility to water for the whole of Tehran, 10 million people with no water just in Tehran. Not to mention Isfahan or Tabriz or Qom or other cities. That's first of all. Secondly, if you took out the bridges and power stations, that would affect their capacity to feed their people, even if they had those food supplies. The other aspect is their capacity to fund and pay the police and the Revolutionary Guards. They are already having severe fiscal problems. They cannot continue like this.
Do you think the army at some point, Jacob, would rebel, as it happened to Romania, as happens to other Eastern European countries?
It wouldn't matter so much about the army. It would matter more about the Revolutionary Guards.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, if the army rebels.
Yeah, the army is like the Russian army, the Soviet army. It was really the KGB that was more important than the army. Or with Hitler,
I'm not talking about importance. I'm not talking about importance. I'm talking about whether you see the army, which are larger in numbers than the RIGC, would they rebel against the RIGC?
They may be larger in number, but they don't have the power. Remember, with the Soviets, the KGB had its own army. It wasn't just spies and a police force.
Would they go on the side?
That's the way the Iranians are.
Yeah, you think they would go on the side of the people eventually?
No, but I do think that the unpaid, that if they're not being paid, that they will look after their own interests. And if they're being targeted by the Americans and Israelis and they're dying in significant numbers, they'll put number one first. Some of them definitely will.
Yeah. I mean, there's been reports that some of them already have, but not enough to make any difference.
You see, you got to understand the way dictators think. Stalin used the KGB, Hitler used the SS. You had the German army, but it was separate. Well, Iran's the same. You got the Iranian military, which has largely been destroyed or undermined. But then you've got the Revolutionary Guard. That's the power.
Yeah, that's the power, but not the number. So, in the Eastern European, it flipped. It flipped. The army actually got on the side of the people, and eventually
it was the same thing. The army in Romania went against Ceausescu, but the Securitate did not.
Did not, until eventually they fell. Jacob, I want to talk about Turkey real quick because there was reports, in early in the war that the Kurdish army was being weaponized, they were being trained, and there were probably some intelligence agencies on the ground. And they were in agreement that they could go into Iran and freed what mounts about maybe 5 to 6 million Kurds that live in Iran, probably a little bit more than that in some of the areas.
Yes.
In total, could be around 9 million Kurds that live in Iran. That largely was abandoned and partly has to do with Turkey's pressure and the agreement that Trump had with Turkey and Erdogan and some Israelis that didn't want to have the Kurds coming into Iran and create a bigger war there. I don't know if those reports are correct or not, but bottom line is the Kurds are not in play anymore. Do you think Turkey is enforcing a lot of pressure on this war not to get the Kurds involved and somehow maintain some kind of military prowess in the Middle East?
It's not only that, but Turkey has been collaborating with Putin, allowing overflights of supply planes carrying munitions from Russia into Iran. Turkey has also had training facilities for Iranian-backed terrorists inside of Turkey. It's not being widely reported, but it has been happening. Turkey is absolutely adverse to any expression of Kurdish nationalism, whether it is in Syria, whether it is in Iraq, whether it is in Iran. Turkey fears Kurdish nationalism because you've got 20 million Kurds in Turkey who want independence, at least in principle. So Turkey will oppose it. There's this need to try to placate Turkey because of the insular air base and because of the Turkish control of the Dardanelles, the seaway connecting the Aegean and Mediterranean with the Black Sea. It is strategically vital to the interests of NATO and the West. So Turkey, it has to be placated unless you can get rid of Erdogan, which they tried to do and failed.
Yes,
this is the problem. Turkey is the issue.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of Israelis within the Israeli intelligence are concerned about Turkey, and I think they're right.
Very.
And the influence that the Qatari and the Turkish government has, unfortunately, on Trump. Trump was ready to hit some of the Iranian sites, nuclear energy sites, and backed off after, at least reportedly, after conversations with Erdogan. And
the best way to bring down Turkey is to collapse its economy.
Yeah.
That is its Achilles heel, to collapse its economy. That is the best way to deal with Erdogan, is to collapse the Turkish economy.
Yeah, which is fragile, which is very, very, very fragile, even at the moment.
Inflation is almost out of control, and they can't stop it.
Yeah. Now, turning over to Israel, Jacob, the Netanyahu affirmed again the U.S. and Israel relationship, full coordination with Iran. There were some questions about some fractures and different disagreements in terms of goals and what they want to accomplish. But the IDF security agencies are absolutely assuring we're in lock and step with Pete Hegseth, with Trump, with the Americans, what they want to do in the Strait of Hormuz. Obviously, there are some questions about Lebanon and things like that. We'll get to that in a moment. But do you agree with that there's lock and step as it never been before?
I don't think that they're lock and step to the degree that they would like the public to believe, but I still think that they're marching to the tune of the same drummer. Don't watch what politicians say, watch what politicians do. The very fact that the Trump administration has not done anything effectively to restrain Israeli counteroffensives in Lebanon against Hezbollah speaks volumes. The action speaks louder than the words. The problem here is, of course, the Lebanese government. I would point to the editorial that's been posted on the Moria website by Reuben Rothler. Will Lebanon lose another vital opportunity to regain its independence from having these states within a state? Arafat had one. Now Hezbollah has one. Now there's a chance to get rid of it if they cooperate with the Israelis. I'd point to the editorial by Reuben Rothler on the Moria website.
The U.S. is going to host a third round of these talks. They haven't gone much further than just preliminary stuff. In fact, unfortunately, the Lebanese president refuses to meet with Netanyahu, despite Trump's pressure, Marco Rubio's pressure, the Israeli ambassador Huckabee's pressure. So they're scheduled for May 14th and 15th, which is kind of interesting within the confirmation of
Lebanon will
Israel
blow it
state.
for the third time. If he continues on this path, Lebanon will blow it for the third time.
Yeah, I'm going to go to Elon. Elon, what do you think? Do you think this is going to go anywhere? Third rounds. I know third time's a charm, but what do you think?
Well, the trouble is with the Lebanese government, it's not entirely independent of Hezbollah. I mean, they have the whole nation is is a bit of a, what's the word, a mixed bag, and especially since you had the Lebanese civil war when the PLO had moved in there and stirred up trouble, and then the Hezbollah came in. It's a very, very divided nation, and that is reflected in the state of it. Over the last decades, one way that the Lebanese, one way they have a change of government in there is by simply assassinating prime ministers, and
Yes.
it's a messed up, very messed up, broken country, and I wouldn't hold my breath that they will, take the opportunity to be rid of, the Hezbollah and make those guarantees to stop them doing what they're doing. There's too much there, I think, weighed against it, unfortunately. I think it would be over optimistic to expect the Lebanese government to really do anything truly effective. I really do think Israel will be stuck with having to have a buffer zone, and as Bezalel Smotrich said, we need to expand our borders and give ourselves that buffer zone. I think that's going to be an unfortunate reality, really, in a sense. Whether I think in many ways we'd rather not go in there at all, but we have no choice. And if the Lebanese don't do anything about it, their government doesn't do anything about it, the Hezbollah, then we just have to be there anyway.
Yes.
What
Elon says is correct.
Yeah.
Elon is completely
I wanted to ask
correct.
Elon real quick. Go ahead.
Lebanese government lives in fear of what happened to Bashar Gemayel, who was assassinated, and lives in fear of what happened to Hariri, who was assassinated. And he knows that they'll assassinate him very easily. Yasser Arafat set up a government within Lebanon that was independent of the Lebanese government. And then Syria, under Assad, backed by Iran, did the same thing with Hezbollah. This is the third and probably final chance for Lebanon to get control of its own country. But that would require active cooperation with Israel to do it. And he's resisting. That's the situation.
Yeah, one of the points that Trump made very clear, and this is about the 14th point that he submitted to the Iranian regime regarding the meeting in Pakistan, is one of them had to go the fact that they cannot have any proxies like this. So Hezbollah is at the choke point, and we'll see what happens with the Iran 14 points with Iran. But Hezbollah continues to attack. Jacob, they killed some Israeli soldiers a couple of weeks ago, where we're supposed to have a ceasefire. Israelis retaliated in defense, and Israel just killed their senior Hezbollah commander in Beirut. Your thoughts on that? Because Netanyahu says we promised security. They weren't going to stand back, and even with the ceasefire, while Hezbollah keeps attacking them.
This goes back to Menachem Begin and the Operation Litani, Shalom LaGalil, Peace for Galilee. The central situation is the Lebanese government can cooperate with the Israelis and gain complete political control and strategic control over Lebanon independently, or it can continue to live under this continual regime within a regime, a foreign entity, a terrorist-controlled entity, getting control of their country like Arafat did and like Assad did. So the Israelis have no choice. They say, look, you can either cooperate with us and we will help you secure control of your own country with no outside interference. You can make a treaty with us along the lines of Camp David, or along the lines of the treaty we have with Jordan. You can have a relationship with us as we have with Egypt and with Jordan. It may not be the happiest relationship, but it's better than war, and you'll have control of your own country. However, if you don't want that, if you continue to allow these foreign controlled entities to set up governments within your own country, not controlled by the Lebanese majority of the people, then we all have no choice but to defend our own territory from these Hezbollah attacks. We're going to act unilaterally. We prefer to act in concert with you, to your advantage and to ours, but we're going to protect our people. We have no choice but to do it. Again, will Lebanon blow its third opportunity to have control of its own country? Another factor here is the Islam, Jews, and Christian factions demographically within Lebanon. When Syria split from Lebanon split from Syria after World War I, the French wanted Lebanon to be essentially a Christian homeland where the Jews can control their own areas, the Muslims can control their own areas, and the Maronite Catholics could control their own areas, and the Greek Orthodox their own areas. But they wanted it to be a country where people of all religions would have equality, but it would be basically Christian controlled predominantly. That was the original plan with the partition under the French. That has not happened. It's always been robbed by Islam. And the two occasions when the Israelis offered it back to them, they turned it down.
I want to go to Eli. Eli, real quick, I'm going to trace back a little bit to the Kurds, because we've been getting reports about the Kurds in Syria. We didn't talk about the Kurds in Syria. We talked about the Kurds in eastern Turkey, but not the Kurds in Syria. They've been rebelling against al-Jilani because they say they're not getting the respect, or they're not getting, obviously, the land. And there's a revolt there. And you know how much al-Jilani is, you would say, control at the behest of Turkey. Your thoughts on the Kurds? Because the Kurds are becoming very much more vociferous over the past few years, and they're willing to take up arms against the Turks and against the Iranians.
Yeah, wow. I mean, one of the things that actually in Iran, it's not just the IR. One of the problems in Iran that they face, it's not just the IRGC. The regime imported a lot of ISIS and Hezbollah fighters into there, and a lot of these things that you see on the streets, people being massacred. It's not just the IRGC; it's these nut jobs that they've imported that just drive around shooting people. So that's another probably reason why it's problematic trying to get the Kurdish militias into there. I've forgotten what the question was now. Sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. That's all right. Jacob, I'll give Jacob real quick. Jacob, do you think we're going to betray them again? Every president has betrayed the Kurds here in America. Every president, just about.
Everyone.
We promise.
Betrayed the Kurds.
Yeah, is this going to go down the road again?
Obviously, Obama and Joe Biden betrayed the Kurds. Every single one has sniped the Kurds in the back. And I've said from the beginning, the only people you can trust there, other than the Druzes, are the Kurds. They're the only ones you can trust.
Yeah, this is the sad part about this, and I hope Trump doesn't do it, because I think better of him. But nonetheless, it is at the behest of Erdogan. These things are happening in Syria and in eastern Turkey.
Absolutely, he holds the West captive.
Yeah, absolutely. Jake, I'm going to pivot to the Board of Peace in Gaza. And this is, again, the UAE, United Arab Emirates, sent $100 million for training Gaza police force and trying to keep the peace. This has been largely a failure, the Board of Peace. From the beginning, we talked about it here in Catching Up, that it was not going to be good, or at least somewhat a stalemate. Gaza is still in Hamas's hands, and they don't want to give up the weapons, no matter what Witkoff and Kirshner say, or what Trump says, or what the UAE says. Maybe this is just a bunch of grift, but they promised $17 billion to donate to the reconstruction of Gaza and get Hamas out of there. Do you think it's going to go anywhere?
No, it will not. You're trying to buy them off. It will not work unless Hamas is removed, destroyed, utterly destroyed. there is no prospect for a lasting peace in Gaza. Absolutely none. Hamas must be destroyed in Gaza. Hezbollah must be destroyed in Lebanon. Otherwise, there is no realistic prospect for an enduring peace. Now, by an enduring peace, I mean something like Camp David or something like with Jordan. I don't think it's going to be a buddy-buddy peace, but it's better than war. But you're not going to get even that unless you get rid of Hamas and Hezbollah. Remember, they're driven by radical religious ideologies.
Yeah, no doubt.
I would just like to,
yeah, go ahead, Jay.
if I could, I would just like to say, given what we've been calling it since the beginning, I think we should rename the Board of Peace to the Board of Sheesh, because I mean, there's absolutely no value to it.
Yes, but there's another factor. Qatar is controlled by the Muslim Brotherhood. Yeah. Hamas is funded and backed by Iran, but it is the military faction of the Muslim Brotherhood. You've got the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, who murdered Sadat. You've got the Muslim Brotherhood active in the United States with the CAIR's leadership. That has happened. You've got the Muslim Brotherhood controlling the royal family and the government of Qatar, and you've got the Muslim Brotherhood in Gaza. The Muslim Brotherhood is the invisible enemy that everybody knows is there, but nobody wants to look at. It's like they've made it invisible, but it's not invisible. The hand of the Muslim Brotherhood is there, but we tolerate it in America. It's tolerated in Britain. It's tolerated in the Middle East. It should not be tolerated. The Muslim Brotherhood needs to be wiped out, the same as ISIS, the same as Al-Qaeda. It needs to be destroyed, even if that means destroying the government of Qatar. They are not our friends. They're funding these universities and political institutions in the United States. They're a foreign enemy.
No, I agree with that. Jacob, before we leave the Middle East and the U.S. war in Iran, I want to ask you a couple of things, and let's just stick to the subject here. Project Freedom. Project Freedom has been suspended by Trump. This is the help and the allies in the Gulf. That was Saudi Arabia and Qatar that we just mentioned. And he has a trip to China next week. So my question to you is, he says, Iran has 1 week to sign this deal. I'm going to China. Hope when I get back, this is done. And he just suspended the Project Freedom. So is he playing harder ball now than he was at the beginning?
He suspended the Project Freedom because of the lack of operational support and permission to have overflight over Saudi airspace. Now that has been basically removed, so he can resume it. He probably can resume protecting these ships going through the Straits of Hormuz. What I think he should do, though, is something else concerning China. China has told its companies, and remember, the party controls all business, that they should defy the American oil embargoes. They should defy the American oil embargoes and continue to trade with Iran and fund Iran, which funds Iran. Mr. Trump should say, I'm not coming to China unless you remove that.
Yeah. What about the 1 week deal with Iran? You think that's going to hold water? I mean,
I would make it 48 hours.
Yeah. Project Freedom, maybe reinstituted now that
that can be resumed within 24 hours.
Yeah. A deal with China, perhaps, and a deal with Iran. I mean, he could accomplish a lot more, but I don't think
he may be going to talk to China because he knows China is vulnerable and he's trying to pressure China to pressure Iran. That may be one of his strategies. But the Chinese have told their own companies to continue to defy the American embargoes and don't worry about the secondary sanctions.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting in the Strait of Hormuz. Jake, I'm going to pivot to the UK elections. Labour is set, and we've been looking at the numbers recently. Historic defeat, and everywhere. Scotland, Wales, and of course England. Tremendous surge by the Reform Party. Farage has really killed the two-party system, seemingly, and he is dominating the midterm. So I'm going to turn it over to you. Truly historic, not only what happened in Wales, but what happened in England too.
At present count, the Tories have lost 700 seats in the by-elections of about 8%. But the losses to Labour are 18% and growing. Small gains by the Greens, small gains by Restore Britain. Huge losses for Labour and significant losses for the Tories, except in certain areas around London. This is the reality. For those not familiar with the British political system in the United States and elsewhere, by-elections are the political pulse of the general elections in Britain, much the same as the midterm congressional elections are the political pulse of the next presidential elections. It tells you the way the nation is leaning politically for the next big election. And this is firmly gone against Starmer. However, in the Labour Party, it is very difficult to remove a party leader just because of the rules of the party. Starmer is determined to hang in there by hook or by crook, it would seem like. It would take a backbench revolt of Labour parliamentarians afraid of losing their own seats in the next election to come against him and oust him. He's determined to hang in there. Again, it's not good for Labour. It's not good for the Conservatives, but it's a disaster for Labour. There's also been marginal losses by the Lib Dems, just maybe 1% loss, but they've not gained anything. And Scotland is pretty much status quo. It's not gone well for Labour. It's not gone well for anybody except the parties that have already been in power overall. But what is a big shock is the traditional collieries and valleys in Wales. Traditional Labour Party strongholds have lost, some to the Reform Party, but some to the Welsh Nationalist Party. Priad Simru, I can't even say the Welsh names.
Plaid Cymru.
Yeah, Plaid Cymru, yeah. I can't read the street signs in Cardiff, I'm sorry. But that's what it says. And I can even speak a little bit of Irish Gaelic, but the Welsh, forget it. This is a shock to Wales and a shock to Labour. To make those kinds of losses in the industrial heartland or the Rust Belt of the north of England and in the collieries, the former coal production areas of Wales, and those kinds of numbers. It is unprecedented. It's never happened to this degree in any by-election, not in living memory. Certainly not since the Second World War, if not before.
Yeah, this is Labour's Ellen Nude Morgan lost her seat for the first time.
Yes.
This has never happened before. And boy, this is historic. Obviously, as the scale of Labour's collapse isn't something to be dismissed. Elon, I'm going to go to you real quick. This is your homeland. Your thoughts on the election? What happened Thursday? Well, you were born there.
Well, yes.
Yeah, can't change that.
It's a sense of relief in one sense that as Yakov said, this is an indicator of where things might go in the general election, and I can't. At least there are some people still left in the UK who have most of their marbles, and they've woke up and smelt the coffee, which is what's the word, reassuring. Unfortunately, they've got another because Starmer is not going to, because now he knows what would happen to him at a general election. He's not going to back down and call a general election. He wants to hang on there, and he actually used the pretext, he doesn't want there to be chaos. Well, the thing is, he is the cause of the chaos in many ways. He and his party and their policies have practically destroyed Britain, but he wants to hang on there and finish the job, unfortunately. But it does give me some hope politically for Britain. But I mean, Britain needs two things. It needs a massive shift towards the right, enough, and the political will to kick out Muslims from the UK, to deport them all. Yes. And also it needs a massive spiritual revival. and repentance and revival and a surge towards the right to generate the political will to fix the immigration crisis and the cultural crisis that is overwhelming the nation. But that is encouraging. Those local election results are encouraging.
Yeah, because you even had Restore Britain. Yeah, Restore Britain.
Yes.
10 out of 10 council positions in Norfolk, which is his area you mentioned. But it's
Yes.
good to see that. It's good to see that. And Jacob Prash, you think it's a shot across the bow, I guess you could say, for Starmer. He recently said today he's not backing down. Literally, I'm not going to walk away from this. So are we heading toward a general election that's going to be fireworks coming up pretty soon?
They're going to fight desperately and engage in every sort of political trickery and manipulation, devoid of ethical consideration and even legal consideration they possibly can. Think of it as running parallel to the Trump derangement syndrome, woke left, the progressivists in America. You know, they're trying to hold on to power. They'll do anything. They'll engage in violence. They'll celebrate the murder of Charlie Kirk and assassination attempts on Trump. That's how vicious it became in America. Well, you have a British equivalent. It's the same essential thing. Sociologically and politically, it's almost the same thing. They become desperate. And when they become desperate, they become more angry and more vicious. But add to this the Islamic problem, who are vicious anyway.
Yeah, it's truly a historical shift if you think about the by-elections in terms of what's going to happen next. But Jacob, the reality of Islam, you mentioned this, and I'm going to quote a survey he had done regarding Christianity in the West. Speaking of course, UK and Spain mainly. It's called Islam Populism. The reality of the fact 1 in 4 UK Muslims, and these are citizens born in UK, hold positive view of Iran's IRGC. They hold positive views toward blasphemy laws, toward Sharia law, attitudes toward Jewish people, very negative, anti-Semitic, and their religion is more important than national identity. Can this be uprooted? Obviously, it can be uprooted just by a general election, but can this be uprooted?
Cannot. First of all, I believe the percentages are actually higher than that. How much higher, I'm not sure, but I believe that is an underestimation. Secondly, even the Muslims who will not say that they are anti-Semitic, or Muslims who will say that they are not pro-Sharia, that does not mean they're going to speak out against the Muslims who are for those things. It does not mean that the so-called centrist or misdefined moderate Muslims are going to stand up in opposition to the other ones who are radical. Most of them won't. Most of them won't. The Westernized, civilized Muslims in Britain and in any European country and in the United States are a distinct minority. Remember, there are a minority of civilized Muslims. There's a minority of civilized Muslims. I mean civilized in this cultural, sociological sense. Okay, there's a minority of civilized Muslims, but nowhere in the world is there civilized Islam. There's not one Muslim country of the 52 that will give Christians and Jews the rights they get in Britain, America, Europe, or Israel. None. There is no such thing as civilized Islam. It is a barbarian religion and a barbarian culture that breeds barbarians. Individual Muslims who are not that, yes, I know some. I've met them in different countries, but they are not the majority. There is a radical number that is perhaps 25%, but most of, at least 50% more, are ones who will not go against the radicals. They will not stand up against radical Islam.
Yeah, one of the issues that they brought up, and this is, again, according to survey, whatever we think of it, this is just what the survey said in terms of numbers. About 22% UK Muslims believe Islamophobia is a top issue. So the fact that there's even the fact that they want to vote for these things, blasphemy law, Sharia law, and all this stuff, they also are very sensitive about anybody attacking or criticizing
Yep.
Islam. Islamophobia is a huge issue.
Yep.
And of course, labor has been very much in favor of that. Jacob, your thoughts, you would have to change the whole system there in terms of what Islamophobia really is.
You know, I go back. Let's look at a historical precedent. I've said this before. You had a similar type of mentality with Shintoism in Imperial Japan during the Second World War. The only way that MacArthur was able to civilize, to take a barbarian religion of emperor worship, who engaged in diabolical cruelty akin to Stalin and Hitler, just as bad. What they did to the Filipinos and Chinese and Nanking, what they did to the Koreans, and even to some of their own people. The only way to neutralize something that wicked and bring it into a civilization and democracy is to do what MacArthur did. He made the emperor come to him and acknowledge in the media, on the radio, that he was not a god and that these things were simply not true. You had to, MacArthur knew he had to demythologize Shintoism. Unless you are willing to demythologize Islam, you are not going to cause it to become a civil religion or culture. The religion itself must be demythologized. And Bush didn't do that. Obama didn't do that. Joe Obama didn't do that. Unless you're willing to do what MacArthur did, you are never going to take a barbarian culture, mentality, political system, philosophy, and make it civilized. You're never going to do it. The religion must be demythologized the way that Shintoism was by MacArthur.
So that was done back then. Jacob, anyone do you know that could possibly do that today?
No. Well, look, after September 11th, the Saudi Arabians who funded it, who funded Al-Qaeda, had the Bush administration in their back pocket. Of course not.
Yeah.
Donald Trump may be the best hope because he's not as far gone, but even Kushner and Whitaker met with the Qataris.
Yeah, Witkoff is a rather dubious character.
He is.
Yeah, Elon, you see this encroachment, obviously, on society for a long time. 7% is what most reports show of Islam population in the UK. It's probably a lot higher than that. The name Mohammed is the most popular name. That kind of tells you a little bit about society. Any way to reverse this in the UK?
Well, that's based on a certain presupposition. One, that you get a hard right government. Unless that happens, such a thing would be a pipe dream. But I don't think, well, from the way I would see it, I don't think violence on a very, very big scale can be avoided in the UK. Whichever way it goes, it's going to get very violent, I think. And I mean, it's not. No, I don't want it to get violent, but you can't. I don't think it can be avoided. One, if Islam is allowed to continue growing, at some point they will start their physical jihad against the non-Muslim population and start killing people or forcing them to convert. That is the way that the religion operates. On the other hand, if you get a government that is favorable to deporting and exporting, even those who have been there for 2 generations, just clean the whole thing out, root and branch, then that will also result in violence as well, because that will be so I think some kind of civil war is almost inevitable. I mean, Britain could end up like Lebanon, with enclaves of terrorists and Muslims, like Birmingham, Bradford, Leeds. These could end up as terror enclaves, like little Gazas, and it could be And the British Army isn't up to eradicating this problem.
No,
it couldn't fight its way out of a wet paper bag at the moment, and it's getting further degraded as every month goes by. Under this Labour government as well. So it's not it's not a it's not a bright and rosy future I see for the next few decades in Britain, along with the economic problems and the Islam problem also. But there is one other thing. Yaakov talked about demythologization, and I have been hearing reports, that many Muslims are turning to Christianity and getting saved, or even leaving Islam because of the influences through the internet. So that, it needs to be a two-pronged approach in a sense. But maybe there is, but it's a very, Britain does not have any easy choices. It's gone too
No.
far for that now. It's going to whichever way it goes, it's going to get very difficult there, I think.
Jacob, I'm going to go to you real quick.
Yeah. Everything Elon has said is correct. First of all, what is happening with Jehovah's Witnesses, what is happening with the Mormons on the internet, their beliefs being exposed and challenged, is causing a exodus of people from the Watchtower cult and from Mormonism, at least in the United States. That is true. Well, that has begun to happen in Islam. God bless, Jay Smith and Hatun Tash and Al-Fati, brother Al-Fati, and our late brother Nabil, and of course, David Wood. God bless all of those guys for the fantastic work they're doing. And it's early days yet. Okay, that is true. But also the trend you see taking place in Denmark and in Sweden now, a reaction. Once Starmer is gone, that kind of a trend will gain momentum in Britain. The question is how far it will go. Thirdly, but there is a reaction, and it's in Ireland somewhat. Thirdly, we have to understand these things above all prophetically. The conflict between the kings of the north and the kings of the south. There will ultimately be some kind of a conflict between the Judeo-Christian Western world and the Islamic world. I'm convinced.
Yeah, sticking to in the European area, especially in the Western Europe, Jacob, you have things like the UK and Spain. You have Germany, who reveals 78% of Germans believe asylum seekers are failing to integrate into society. Well, that's long and gone already. That should have been 20 years ago.
Angela Merkel did her damage.
No doubt.
She was the true daughter of Mohammed.
There's no free speech and no free speech to speak the gospel. So this is what Christians are facing now in countries like the UK. I'm going to give you an example, and you can go off of those. Steve Maley, the pastor of Oasis Church City Church, was arrested in Watford for what? Preaching John 3:16. He's out on bail. He's due in court in July. But what is he accused of? Hate speech. Clyde Johnstown, Northern Ireland, convicted and fined for preaching John 3:16. The crime, holding a service in a safe zone near a hospital. He preached this near a hospital. Obviously, John 3:16, the most loving message you could probably ever hear in the history of the world. Jacob, are Christians ready for this? Because pastors are getting arrested. There's no free speech, seemingly on paper, yes, but practically no.
Again, God has always used persecution to separate the wheat from chaff, from the truly committed believers, from the religious riffraff, for one of the better term. Satan has set up the church in Britain to believe there was going to be revivals coming from this laughing and drunken stuff. The devil had powerful messengers in Great Britain. Certainly people like the late Wynne Lewis and Colin Dye, people, Ken Gott. These were men who just spoke from Satan to tell the church revival was coming when in fact persecution was coming. 25, 30 years ago, Moriel was saying, prepare for persecution. They were saying, prepare for revival. Only their revival had no resemblance to any biblical or historical picture of what happens or transpires in a revival. To them, it was just a drunken fiasco and nonsense and heresy. But that's what happened. The church is by and large not ready. What happened in Northern Ireland is frightening because Coleraine is the buckle of the Bible Belt of Great Britain. That is the place that has the highest percentage of proportion of evangelical church attendance anywhere in the UK. What happened in Watford? 50 feet away, 50 feet away. There were Muslims with loudspeakers. The police did not dare interfere with them. They only went after the Christian for preaching. That's how corrupt the British police have become. Once a respected police force, now just the political Gestapo of the left, of the woke left. The Stormers Gestapo. That's what it is. The Muslims could get away with it. Homosexual activists can get away with it, but they'll arrest a Christian 50 feet away for preaching a message of love, while Muslims can preach a message of jihad without interruption by the police. And you look at the police, you got these lesbian women with the tattoos and everything. That is what the British police have become from. Just the same as in the NYPD in the United States. Cops just retiring, not wanting the job, so they're hiring people who at one time would have been seen as unfit to be police. Britain is the same. The British police has been degraded in terms of its manpower and labor force. You've got this woman locked this preacher up saying, in the name of Jesus, get in the police car. They would never treat Muslims like that. 50 feet away with impunity. It's absolutely God's judgment. But God will use this persecution to separate the true church from the false church, from the harlot church. And by the harlot church, I don't just mean Roman liberal Protestants. I mean backslidden evangelicism and the Evangelical Alliance that for 30 years has been betraying the gospel and not upholding Christian standards.
Yeah, this has been a problem, and we talked about it in a persecution video that we just did. It's probably going to be on Memorial TV pretty soon, Davey. Is that right? Yes. Okay. Very good. And the reality is Christians are not ready for it. Jay, I'm going to go to you. Jay, you preached on the streets. You have a street ministry to homeless, to gospel preaching to the people on the street. Can you see this happening in the U.S.? You have 1% of Muslim population in the U.S., if you want to believe that, but just let's say it's around there. And it's growing. You see Texas, you see Michigan, you see Minnesota. It's growing. Is the UK a cautionary tale for Americans here?
It's absolutely a cautionary tale. And what's more, Jacob is absolutely correct. The church in England was not ready for, let's call it, the immigration crisis in Great Britain. We're not ready for it here. What I have noticed online, especially when it comes to Islamic apologetics, people are not prepared to defend the faith of why they believe what they believe. And all too often, I find that Christians are unwilling to study to show themselves approved. I'm going to give you an example. There are plenty of times that I've watched as we've allowed Islamic apologists, Dawahists, to use our Bible to basically ridicule it and say it makes no sense. But I do not see many Christian apologists using the Quran to show how faulty it is when you try to compare it to the narrative. If a Christian reads the Quran and has somewhat biblical literacy, the thing falls apart. Suddenly, in one surah, it says that Allah names the animals. In Genesis 2:19, it says Adam names the animals, and we have manuscripts that go back 800 years before the Quran. And I've used this many times with Islamic apologists. They can't answer it because they know that the text that Muhammad was referring to, it was probably Genesis from the Dead Sea Scrolls or before. And so what's the default? Oh, well, it's the word of God.
Yeah. And you've seen some of these guys online that they're absolutely a joke when it comes to trying to even, they integrate the Bible into their message. I've heard, I forget some of the guys' name, but, Muhammad's in the Bible, and Christians freak out sometimes because it's like, how's Muhammad in the Bible? Well, he's the comforter. And it's very easily to debunk their craziness, but very few are doing it. And
they're not equipped. They're not equipping themselves, which is the worst part. That's why it's so bad. Is Americans, Christians especially, for the most part, they are biblically illiterate. They haven't read the whole Bible and they have not studied it, so they're not ready for any type of apologia against Islam, and they're well read on the Bible.
Yeah, well, they're trained to destroy the Bible, and they're trained to destroy people's faith, and I think that is missing within the church in terms of that edginess and that. And I'm not saying, I guess the greatest sin in the church is to be mean, and people don't want to be mean, so they don't want to say anything. So that's part of our problem in our society is we don't want to be mean. But in reality, it's not being mean; it's being, as we'll find out with Pastor Steve Mail. He says is the most loving thing to do is to tell Muslims that one day they're going to have to bow before Christ, that they're going to have every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, and they're not exempt from that. But unfortunately, I think a lot of Christians just don't like to do that, or they're afraid, or perhaps Jacob, Jay, to your point, is they don't like to use the Quran because maybe they're afraid that they would be considered hateful, or they would be labeled as, unloving. I don't know. Maybe they're just afraid of being attacked.
Marco, I'm honest when I say this. I'm trying to teach other Christians about the difficulties the Quran has, and I've been told, "Why are you reading and studying that book? How could you even touch that book?" Because I want to do outreach to the Muslim community. How can I do it unless I know?
Correct.
Yeah.
Unless I know their book.
You
I'm
can't
blind
reach
as a
Mormons
bat.
if you don't read the Book of Mormon. You can't reach Catholics if you don't read the Catechism. You can't reach Jews if you don't read the Talmud, or religious Jews, and you can't reach Muslims if you don't read the Hadith and the Quran. That's absolutely true.
It was said of Trump, and I think it was one of his ex-wives. I'm not sure which one. He says he keeps a copy of Mein Kampf next to his bed, and they asked him about it because it was like a big scandal, and he said, "Well, obviously I'm going to read it because I wanted to know exactly what he was going to do." If Germans read it in 1933, they probably would have escaped a lot of the tragedies that happened if they would have read Mein Kampf at that point. If we would have read Klaus Schwab's book on the virus and the new industrial revolution and all the stuff that they're trying to do, perhaps we would have been more aware of it. If we read the Quran, if Parliament read the Quran, if the Congress read the Quran, they probably would not pass all these laws that would actually integrate Islam into a society that's basically it's not congruent with Islam. It's our Constitution and Islam are completely opposite. But that's just the way it is. That's just the way it goes. And the church needs to be ready. Jacob, I'm going to go to you because an event happened in January near your house. Lots of things happening near your place. So you're at the epicenter. Pastors were brought to the middle of Tennessee to discuss, believe it or not, something that maybe 20 years ago we probably would have laughed at and not willing to talk about, but it is real. Intelligence officials brought pastors in, other Christian broadcasters and podcasters came in to prepare the church for what? A disclosure that is going to shake, according to officials, shake the faith of a lot of people in terms of UFO disclosures, interdimensional beings, and it's gaining a lot of traction. In fact, a lot of people are talking about it. We'll talk about what is not and what it is. And the reality is, this was much discussed. Footages, videos, the soon disclosure. I can't think some of it came out today. Trump has already signed it into executive order that they will be disclosing more and more. These briefings are to prepare, is what they said, to prepare the church, to prepare Christians, because many of them are ill-equipped, as we're talking about, ill-equipped to apologetics, ill-equipped to share the word of God. Well, they'll be ill-equipped to know how to handle the news that is coming. It is going to be an alien disclosure that, according to Tennessee Representative Tim Burchett, is going to shake the faith of many. Jacob, your thoughts on this? This is not a joke. It's not TMZ. It's not some kind of outlandish conspiracy. It happened. It is happening, and the disclosures are coming.
Once more, going back to the 1970s, I was one of the Christians who believed the Lord showed me personally in Manhattan. I was a young believer, and I was praying that the Antichrist and false prophet are going to use extraterrestrial phenomena to deceive people. Now, proving that is something else. Problematically, many people get into conspiracy theories with the Nephilim. Nonetheless, the Lord Jesus made it clear, just as it was in the days of Noah. And the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back in the days of Noah was when the Nephilim came and procreated with human women, creating demonoids. Something like that must happen again. And I'm not trying to push the conspiracy theories that go with it. I'm just trying to say this is what Jesus said, and this is what happened. My late friend, wrote a book. John Weldon. He's the ghostwriter for John Ankerberg and so forth. John Weldon wrote a book with Zola Levitt on UFOs and the evidence for them being of a demonic nature based on scripture. And John was quite a Christian author. He was a serious researcher. He was not a joke. He was not somebody who'd say crazy things. Either would William Brehm. William Brehm was a Christian member of the Mensa organization, the High IQ Society, but he was a saved Christian. And he did extensive research into the subject in the 70s. And I began connecting with other people who believed the same thing. And then I found out there were many more. There is no doubt in my mind that there is a demonic nature to these extraterrestrial phenomena, and that it relates to the warning of Jesus, just as it was in the days of Noah. Bearing in mind, I shy away from the conspiracy theorists concerning the Nephilim. Nonetheless, there must be a recapitulation of that kind of scenario. And many Christians who are not well grounded in scripture will be taken in by it, and have their theology gravely upset by it unless they understand the demonic nature of it. Why are they concerned with Christianity? Why are they only concerned with Christianity?
That's one of the problems. And this is one of the reasons they brought pastors in. Unfortunately, they brought guys like Perry Stone and people like that. We'll get to that in a moment.
That's the crazy bit. But also psychiatrists who debriefed people who claim to be abductees. These are government psychiatrists. Said that they all said that somehow they're abductors. The psychiatrist said, we're not saying these people were abducted, but they believe they were.
Right.
And they, independent of each other, most of them began to say that these abductors had a fascination with their reproductive organs, with the genitalia, the genitals of the people. Why is that? Well, what the Nephilim, what was it? It was something sexual, wasn't it? There is much there. I absolutely agree with these pastors. It is something frightening that's coming, and many Christians will be deceived by it. And those who warn that it's demonic are going to be laughed at and say, you're unreasonable. You're this, because they don't have a spiritual worldview.
Yeah, I'm going to go to you, Jay. The disclosure, at least with the information that they were giving to these pastors, at least was what they could say. And we know some of the information that's been passed on through these people have been abducted, we will put it that way. It's a narrative push. The Bible is incomplete. Humans were seeded and influenced by higher beings, interdimensional beings. God is not what Christians think. It's undermining the message of Christ. There is no sin. There is no salvation. Jesus is just another teacher. It's going to bring a lot of questions into the church. Not that we already have all these questions. We'll get to what happened in 2020 in the next section. But it's a unifying message this UFOs have of uniting humanity for something greater. And if you disagree, you're going to be part of the negative culture. You're going to be part of the naysayers. You're impending or evading world peace. You're keeping world peace from happening. This is the narrative that's going to be pushed. How do we prepare for this?
I guess I have a few questions. Are we sure that these aliens aren't Islamists? Because first of all, Jesus is just another teacher.
Yeah.
We have an incomplete understanding of God and His Word. I'm seeing a pattern here, and what's more is we're so scared of Christians and having their faith destroyed by this disclosure. Let me ask a question here. Do you think one Muslim on the earth is going to have their faith destroyed by any type of extraterrestrial disclosure? I don't think so. But I think the church is so naive and so ready to accept anything. I mean, the fact that inside the church you have wacky stuff about the firmaments, about flat earth, about the Tartarian Empire, the Satan's little season, the fact that you have all these fringe elements within Christianity And they actually love to boil it down and say, this is something that you must believe if you want to believe the truth. I think it's kind of a judgment on where the church is today, that a little bit of disclosure from what we know is it's the government. Come on. When has the government shot straight in the past 100 years? Never. They always come up with narratives to present a problem. Oh, we have a solution. And yet,
How do we
people
prepare
will
for this,
fall.
Jay? Yeah, how do we prepare for this?
You have to, again, you have to be grounded in your faith, grounded in prayer, grounded in the word. If you can be distracted by conspiracy, by every wind of doctrine, about every, we can have a complete understanding of the universe if we embrace these new beings, you're gonna be deceived. But if you know the fundamentals of your faith and you are planting your feet on the rock of Christ, you're not going to be moved by this stuff.
Davey, what do you think?
Well, look, I find it interesting for quite a lot of reasons, And look, the trouble with the church is we've already got too many people in the church now who don't believe the biblical account of creation, so they'll buy into a lot of alternatives that they shouldn't. I think of things like the Robert Wise movie, The Day the Earth Stood Still, where, the being was presented as kind of like someone who spoke about peace, who talked about peace. You had films like Spielberg's E.T.
Yes.
You have a child-friendly relationship with, an alien. And basically, look, we know they're basically demonic beings. So, society has been prepped a long time to embrace this kind of thing, but so has the church. And especially when you deny God as our biblical creator. And, we've had that book, what was it, Chariots of the Chariots of the Gods, I think that came out in the late 60s. I mean, I know people, they won't believe as God as creator, but I know quite a number of people who believes that, human life here was seeded by, it's like,
Yes.
by people from Mars, beings from Mars came here and seeded the human race. There's quite intelligent people
Yes,
who
but
believe
even
that.
Francis Watson from Watson and Crick that discovered DNA proposed that in the 50s. This is one of the greatest scientists in the world. Stephen Hawkins, the Oxford professor of philosophy of science, the atheist, he proposed that. He doesn't believe in God, but he believes in UFOs seeding the earth with genetic material. Major scientific and academic voices have echoed those same things you just described, Davey.
Yeah. And the danger is when people reject the truth of God, when they reject the truth of his word, they're going to fall for the lie. They're going to embrace anything and everything. And people are, and this is going to be a big part of that deception.
Just interjecting on this, as to the impact this kind of thing can have on the church, and how Christians can be deceived, you only have to look at the Toronto blessing.
Yes.
How ridiculous that was, and how many evangelicals or so-called embrace that. And even today, there's still people that think that that's of God, unbelievably. But there are people that still think that is from the Lord. We have a lot of them over here in Israel.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can see how it's increasing, right? It's not just this one thing. It's a little bit here, a little bit there, and then you have the big crescendo, which may be coming. And obviously the focus needs to be on readiness, on discernment, on anchoring the scripture and fellowship and prayer. Jake, I'm going to ask you this. In Luke 21:11, we discussed this earlier.
Yes.
There will be fearful sights in the heavens. Some of these pastors, whether well-meaning or ignorant or whatever it may be, are sensationalizing this text to a degree that says the word phobos or phobetra is the idea of fearful sights. It means monsters, and therefore these monsters, these aliens, are going to show up and it's going to freak people out. Let's go to the Greek expert here. Jacob, tell us what that means.
I don't know my expertise, but the word, I would translate the word terrifying or fearful, more like terrifying apparitions in the sky, aerial apparitions that would be terrifying. I don't think you can put the term monster. None of the biblical words that we normally associate with monster, such as apollyon, that's not in the text. They're speculating, they're eisegeting beyond what the text says. But it certainly says there is going to be phenomena of in terms of apparitions that are going to be aerial or aerospace in nature that are going to terrify people, and that's exactly what it says.
Yeah, it's apparitions, signs, appearings in the heavens. Some of them are tying it directly to alien disclosure and UFOs and deception.
Yes.
Is that real?
Well, I've been warning for years. It's a setup with the zeitgeist. To me, Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, David Bowie, was pop music. A movie, The Day the Earth Stood Still, was a sci-fi movie. But then you got into E.T. and Close Encounters of the Third Time. Goes all the way back to Superman and Buck Rogers. I think there are things that have been in popular culture that have affected the zeitgeist, the spirit of the age, that are predisposing the world to this kind of a deception or a seduction. I've said this a number of times. Things that would seem innocuous, that would seem like popular entertainment, but they've affected people's worldview. It has predisposed many people to these kinds of ideas. There's a spiritual seduction in it. It's not just about movies and pop music. It's the spirit of the age. It's the zeitgeist, which is always demonically controlled to a degree.
I'm going to ask you this, Jacob, real quick. There's some disagreements, even among Christians and pastors and well-meaning. These are not heretics or anything like that. In terms of what a demon is, what a fallen angel is, what these UFOs are, they all, for the most part, agree that these are either demons or fallen angels. Can you give us an explanation, a short explanation of just some of the disagreements and some of the unknowns of where these demons? Are they the spirits of
a
Nephilim?
big subject that has become more and more complicated or controversial because of the views espoused by people like the late Michael Heiser and others. And again, you've got the lunatic fringe and the conspiracy theorists in addition, at least Mr. an academic, a serious scholar. Let's look. Paul says we can entertain angels unaware. We see in the Gospels where angelic beings have appeared in human form. This is obvious. This is clear. Sometimes they appear as supernatural beings, like in Isaiah 6, but in the New Testament, we see them appearing as men. Paul says we can entertain angels unaware. The only thing a demon is a fallen angel. They have angelic powers. They have angelic powers, and they can come in human form. And that is what the Nephilim did. They came down and they had relations with human women. This resulted in things like the Gibborim, the Anakim, and so forth in Hebrew. But essentially, they're fallen angels. That's what demons are, and these things are demonic. Now, the same as you can categorize different kinds of angels, like the seraphim from the fiery ones, or the cherubim. Okay, you may have different classifications of fallen angels, like you have classifications of angels. Different variations within their genus, but not genus in the human sense, but in the
category.
In the colloquial sense. Okay, so these things are the fallen angels. That's what demons are.
Yeah, and we're still dealing with Ephesians 6, where Paul declares about principalities.
Absolutely, principalities. Yeah, absolutely, principalities.
Now, do you think there's any traction in thinking some of the Nephilims that died in the flood? These are the spirits of the Nephilim. That's one of the theories.
It says they were there before and after, and they existed at the time of the book of Joshua. And Jesus made it clear there would be some kind of a recapitulation of what happened in the days of Noah, where these things initially came down to Mount Hermon, according to the book of Joshua in Jewish history. So yes, absolutely. I don't say that they're around now, but I think they've been around, and I think they will be around in some form again. I would also point to black necromancy, serious black necromancy. This is witchcraft at its darkest. This is Satanism. Okay, Satanism. The initiation rites of people who've gone into black necromancy have to do with conjugal relations sexually with the devil, with demonic beings. Okay? This stuff, again, has always in some way been around. You also see elements of it in Mexico with the Feast of the Dead, the Night of the Dead, you know, and elements of it in Hinduism and in African traditional religion. These things have always been around to some degree, but they're going to make a big comeback eschatologically, for want of a better term, as they were around in the days of Noah. I have no doubt.
Yeah, you've had witchcraft like Santeria and
correct. Santeria, that's correct.
Yeah, and that's of course increasing. But Jacob, do you find it odd that with the rise of Satanism, the occult, now you have UFO revelation, and it coincides?
It's not a coincidence that the two are concurrent.
Yeah,
and it's not a coincidence that it's concurrent with popular culture fascinated by extraterrestrial life, and it is not a coincidence that it is concurrent with the space program, our own human space program.
Yeah, that it's increasingly, and people are interested in it, and going to the moon, going to Mars, and all that stuff. Jacob, another question is: are you concerned with a lot of these pastors? Some of them, well-meaning perhaps, but some of them are not, I guess, for lack of a better term, maybe they don't have the best interest in mind when they say we need to look into the Book of Enoch now because some of the stuff is in there. Would you encourage your take on the use of the Book of Enoch to interpret this stuff?
We have talked about this on RTN on Word for the Weekend at various other times and made mention of it in my books. When you see apocryphal literature, the intertestamental literature, such as 1st and 2nd Enoch, quoted in Jude, Jude's epistle, for instance, that tells us something. One, God intends us to read that stuff as biblically important history and literature. But there's a difference between reading it as history and literature that can help illuminate our understanding of the background of Scripture and using it as a basis of doctrine. Talmudic Judaism and Roman Catholicism have both canonized those books. They were not held to be canonical by the early church because by the best accounts we have of what the apostles held to be canonical, they did not hold those books as being canon. In other words, they are not a basis of doctrine. So while it is wrong to ignore those books, it is absolutely wrong to use those books as scripture or as canon.
Yeah, and there's an increase, I guess you could say, interest in these things, and so much so that people are actually saying, well, maybe the Book of Enoch should be biblical, and maybe it was.
That was the debate in the early church, but when they went back to the people who knew the apostles, like Papias and Polycarp, who in turn passed these traditions they got directly from the Apostle John to Irenaeus, and then on to Hippolytus and people of that nature, or another one being Papias. The apostles did not hold those books to be canonical. They held them to be important history and literature, as is the Book of Judith.
Yeah. Jacob, would you consider the fact that just as preterists hold Josephus almost to the point of canonical?
Yes.
They interpret everything. That these people are doing the same thing. They look at Enoch and say, this has to be our lens. Just like preterists hold.
The fact that Josephus was an unbelieving Jew who embraced paganism. He not only did he reject his own Messiah for reasons of personal ingratiation with the Romans, he became a pagan, or at least professed to. Why would now, if you want to read Josephus as a historical source, or Eusebius, is Eusebius worth reading? Yes. Would I base any doctrinal conclusion on Eusebius? No.
Yeah, and that's where the problem that I have with friends of mine that are preterists, that everything has to be Josephus' lens. Whatever Josephus said, well, that's got to be the interpretation. And it's like, well, Jesus said, read Daniel, not Josephus, in terms
That's
of
correct.
understanding the abomination of desolation. Same thing here. If you want to understand these beings, of course, there's some background to it and historical things that happen. Enoch has it, Yasher has it,
Yes.
but to
Look,
understand the
Eusebius
spiritual
and
meaning.
Josephus confirmed that the warnings and predictions of Daniel and Jesus did happen. But that's
Correct.
all.
Yeah,
That is
correct.
all. Their historical confirmation.
Go ahead, Davey.
Yeah, just a warning to people out there too, when you're watching a lot of videos on YouTube at the moment, I do notice a lot of them are drawing on the Book of Enoch a lot more. A lot of these so-called new prophecy videos, they are getting into the Book of Enoch a lot more. Some of them are getting really, really, really weird. And so, yeah, be very, very aware and be very, very careful and discerning out there. And I know people who have fallen away, got into some really weird stuff because they've been lifting up the Book of Enoch up and above the Word of God. So, yeah.
David is absolutely correct. David's absolutely correct. But remember, this Enoch thing is piggybacking on the Ethiopian Bible.
Yeah, that's another
That's
big one.
also become a growing phenomena among
Yeah,
some
it's another
Christians.
big one.
And
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
piggybacking on that because the Ethiopian Bible holds it to be canonical.
Yeah, we get a lot of questions like that about the Ethiopian Bible and things like that.
Yes.
And so it is gaining momentum on TikTok and X and places like
Yes,
that. Jacob, we
yes.
got about another 10 minutes before we close out for questions. Here we go again. A new virus, a ship that departed from Argentina in Ushuaia, Argentina on April 1st, got to Cape Verde. It's now been told to basically not disembark anybody. They're just by the Canary Islands. And because the problem of the hantavirus started to come into play, and 23 passengers were exposed, at least eight have been confirmed that they have it. 3 have died. Some have been taken off the boat, taken to Netherlands to be treated. And it is gaining momentum, this Andes antivirus strain. And there are people already calling for lockdowns, masks, vaccines. You already have in the polymarket world, which company is going to come up with the first vaccine of the hantavirus, at least the strain. I guess they were developing it back in 24, 23, but the new strain, human to human transmission, I guess it's the only strain that can be passed from human to human. Otherwise, you have to ingest rat feces in order to get the hantavirus. But Jacob, here we go again. Election season, UFOs, wars. People are afraid. Will this be the tipping point of people going into?
We and others warn that don't expect COVID to be the only instance where you had a politicization of what should have been a scientific, clinical, public health issue that was politicized and exploited on an unbelievable scale for population control, economic manipulation, etc. There's also microbiologists who believe that the ontogeny, the genesis of Hans virus, was from China. What is troubling is the Andes variant, which is the one on the ship, can be transmitted human to human. And they found no rodents on the ship. There's no rodent population. No rodents were found on the ship. I could see how there would be those who would try to exploit this again the way they did COVID and to make it a scare issue to manipulate and control with a political agenda. I have no doubt that could happen again. If you recall, a number of us, and Moriel was not the only ones, warned that there could be future COVIDs doing the same thing. COVID may have been a dry run.
All right, I'm going to go to Jay. Jay, real quick, put your hat on. There you are. Very good. All right.
No problem.
The WHO, not the music group, the WHO, the World Health Organizations, have already said this is not the virus from 2020. This is a different virus, so we need to treat it, differently, but similarly, right? There are 2 cases in Texas, our home state. There's 1 case in Israel, has already been confirmed. Netherlands is concerned that obviously they're treating people there. is it time to start stocking up on toilet paper and making buying some stocks on pharmaceuticals?
I mean, I would say they've already come out and told us that ivermectin is absolutely 100% ineffective against it.
Already?
They've already stated this, that
Oh man.
do not buy ivermectin, and especially if you get it in the horse paste version of it, don't get it.
Oh man.
So they're already preparing the narrative. I you were talking about Polymarket. I just looked on Polymarket. They're trending. Will there be a hantavirus pandemic in
Right.
2026?
Right.
Right now, the odds are really in favor of no.
Oh,
I don't
okay.
know.
Okay.
I wonder, is we were discussing this earlier. Is Fauci doing anything right now? Could we potentially get him back?
Use him as a lab rat.
I hope he was getting prosecuted, but they didn't. They went after the
No,
other
they
guy.
went with the other guy because he's going to come
Yeah.
back and he's going to be the director of the vaccine response for the hantavirus that needs to be rolled out globally.
Yeah. Well, you know, the WHO just had a recent meeting not too long ago about what to do with another virus. Obviously, they've been sort of signaling this for a while. Nobody knew what it was. It could be this, it could be that. But as Jacob pointed out, there may be a second run. That was just only the trial run, and this is the second run. Jay, what do you think? Are we getting set up?
I mean, I'm just going to be pragmatic here. I think that, companies like Moderna and Pfizer, they're not selling like they used to. They're not
No.
making the billions and billions of dollars with COVID-19 vaccines. I think maybe they need a new vaccine to roll out. So, there's a problem. We need to make sure our pharmaceutical industrial complex is fed. Therefore, we need something to scare the people again,
Wow.
and possibly give them a solution.
Yeah, it worked the first time.
Oh, I mean, I wish I had bought stock. I would have been a wealthy man if I put money in Moderna.
Yeah, you would have. The stock was actually pretty low in 2019, and it surged to, it's not what it is now, but it surged pretty high at its peak. What do you think, Jay? Are we heading to an election cycle, and this is happening just in time, or is it just a rollout and it just happens to coincide with an election cycle?
Why does it always happen right before a major election? Could it be?
I know.
Is it like the third act where you're at the intermission and you have the music and then you begin the act with a bang? The timing is very dubious, and then also the origin of the hantavirus. It's you said it was South America, I believe, that the original strand comes from, and it just
Andes.
happens to be transferable human to human by air.
Yep. It just so happens that that one strain, it's the one that's communicative.
And that strain made it from South America onto a boat in the Netherlands.
Yeah, all the way up to, and it got to Israel, and that's in Texas. And
yeah, I'm thinking, did a seagull pick up a rat and then flew it in its beak, like it had a little bit of like maybe meat in the side of it, and then fly it to all the directions that need to be? I mean, was it a seagull drone?
It's possible. I mean, when you got alien disclosures and a war and everything else that's on top, about a bad economy and people are flailing economically, that's just icing on the cake.
I mean, one thing that it would help, I guess, with gas prices, if you did another lockdown, nobody's going to drive this summer, so the gas prices would be inconsequential.
Yes.
That is true. And now you have online on TikTok and on Twitter and basically other social media. Wear a respirator, wear a mask, save others. You can echo back to 2019.
We didn't learn anything, did we? We learned literally nothing from 6 years ago. We're right back to social shaming because your health affects everybody's health.
Well, you hear things like that, and this is a word that's trending. It was the pandemic of the vaccinated. Yeah, pandemic of the unvaccinated. Sorry, a pandemic of the unvaccinated. So this is what you're going to see now. People that refuse or maybe not want to, maybe hesitant are going to be blamed for this, perhaps, just asking questions.
I mean, are we still have we completely left the idea of possible, I'm saying possible vaccine injuries? Have we left that on the table? Are we no longer talking about that?
Yeah. Elon, I'm going to go to you real quick because Israel just reported the first case. It was hard, draconian, very draconian, like in some states here in the United States, just as was in Israel. Have you heard anything about this? Is it gaining momentum in Israel?
I've only just heard about that actually tonight. So
Okay.
I was in fact I was unaware until Jacob mentioned it earlier on that this virus was even going around. I hope it doesn't go the way it went before. I mean, I remember 5 years ago, I was walking down the street about 6:30 in the morning with two dogs, I think. I didn't have a mask on, and I got fined.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't think it would go that the mask thing would go as well as it did in 5 years ago now because. But most Israelis walked around with the mask, maybe covering the face and but their nose stuck out. So I think people have got the idea that the things were a complete waste of time,
Yeah, I mean,
and
it destroyed a lot of people. Jay, to you, it destroyed a lot of people. I mean, you have
yeah,
your own testimony that's very powerful. But it happened to churches. Churches were not the same after that. Many people split from churches, stopped going to church. They stopped coming because they wouldn't shut down. It was a huge
Mm.
rift, and I don't think we've recovered completely from it. When I went to the UK, some churches, what I was told, some churches never came back, and it happened here too. But it happened quite a lot in the UK.
The church issue is a big one because people would use the Bible to basically say you're unloving if you wanted to still gather together and worship. And so many churches did split where people were like, no, no, this is essential. We're supposed to be gathered together praying. But at the same time, I think, like you said, my testimony, I was the height of the pandemic. I got to see it from the belly of the beast. I was in a hospital 45 days for an unrelated issue, but I got to see how crazy bringing in nurses from other states to
Mm.
cover the wards, the C-19 wards, and the amount of time it takes for nurses to respond to a call button. It was crazy. And by the grace of God, I made it out of that. But psychologically, 45 days without seeing your loved ones, my father, my sister, my relatives, that was hard. To see somebody in a mask come and check on you every day and maybe to get a phone call, it's not the same as seeing someone by your bedside. As much as you don't even want people by your bedside, Jesus told us we needed to go and visit the sick, to pray with them. That's an essential. That's part of being a Christian, and yet for the sake of our own safety, we were willing to say, no,
No, follow the words of Jesus. We'll
yeah,
make an exception. Yeah. Yeah, Jay, final thought, and we're going to have to get onto the questions, is the powers that be, whether that would be the Democratic Party, some Republicans, but obviously Bill Gates to Fauci, the WHO, they've all been telegraphing, watch for the next one, watch for the next one, watch for the next one. They tried it a few times, I believe. Now we're here again. Recommendations, learning from the first one onto the second one now, if this is it, if they're gonna exploit it. Any recommendations, encouragement to anyone listening to say, hey, let's follow the scriptures. Let's follow what we need to do as a church and not necessarily what hysteria would call us to do.
you have just hit the nail that I would actually try to pound down. If we're going to go through another one of these, we're going to go through another hysteria, then you as a believer in Jesus need to not regard your life so valuable that you don't try to be the voice of sanity amongst the insanity, to be the voice that speaks peace into people's mind, the one that will be bold during this time to preach the gospel. Because again, between disclosure, between pandemics, between the rise of Islam, there's one truth. The truth is Christ. Christ is the solution. Christ is the answer. And we should be preaching him all the more while people are filled with worry and fear.
Yeah. Thank you. And it's happening. And it's happening as we speak with all the things we talked about. And we don't bring this up just to bring more fear. We bring this up to bring more clarity and truth and the reality that we need to trust in Jesus. No one else, nothing else, nothing less. And we want Jesus to be preached and reign in your hearts. As Paul said, let Christ's word reign in your heart. So this is a lot for a lot of people to digest, and a lot of fear and anxiety among the people. So let's be different and let's be Christ-centered. Maybe this time different than what we used to do back in 2020. So we're going to go to questions. God bless you guys. They're coming in. Jacob's got answers. Hopefully they're questions in relation to today, because there's quite a bit of topics: the UK election, the war. Of course, you have this Hunter virus, and of course the UFO disclosure. Much to talk about with people this weekend. So God bless you guys. We'll see you in just a couple of minutes. Welcome back to Question and Answer with Jacob Prasch. This is the part of the episode that we have some questions and Jacob has some answers. And hopefully one day they don't censor this. But we're living in that age of censorship. So we thank the Lord for platforms that would hold us to it. And we praise the Lord that we can answer these questions. And thank you for your questions being in. And thank Jacob for being here. Jacob Prasch, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Jacob, according to high chronology dating the Exodus to 1440 BC, Moses lived before Pharaoh Ramses. Since Moses wrote the Torah, why does the name Ramses appear 5 times in the Torah? Genesis, Exodus twice, and Numbers twice.
Okay, first of all, we have to understand there were multiple pharaohs named Ramses. The one most associated with scholarship trying to date or attempting to date the time of the Exodus is Ramses II. So that would explain it. There's multiple pharaohs named Ramses. Which one is it talking about? And the basic 2 arguments is an early date and a late date. Best as I can recall offhand, it's 1 Kings chapter 6. 1 Kings chapter 6 dates the construction of the temple to 480 years after the Exodus. That would set the date as the 15th century date, which is the early date. That would support the 15th century date as the early date, circa 1446. That in itself is more important than Ramses, because which Ramses? The late date would be about 1250. That would be in the 13th century. The problem with any of these is you don't have any solid source inside of Egypt for it happening. You do have a reference to the Exodus, or kind of an Exodus, of the Hyksos in 1550, but also you have other things. Nations do not like to admit their failures. For instance, we know that Masada happened. We do know that Masada happened because of Josephus, but the Romans did not like to talk about it because it was a hollow victory to them. It was something of a humiliation. One of the things that drew a distinction between the Old Testament and other historical sources is God demanded, insisted, inspired his word give a historically accurate record. So history was very much revisionist in the other civilizations of the ancient Near East. They didn't like to talk about their defeats much. A final reference may be of someone called, or some group called the Hebiru. Hebiru. Now, it's disputed whether the Hebiru, which was seen as a network of tribes that were raiders, invaders, Hebiru, were they the Hebrews, the Ivrim? Ivrim is related in Hebrew language to the blind ones, to those who are blind. Ivrim is the blind ones. Ivrim are the Hebrews. Were the Hebiru the same as the Hebrews? Nobody can prove any of this. I would argue that based on 1 Kings chapter 6, with the dating of the temple, that is the best indication we have internally in Scripture that it was a 15th century date. But you're going to find scholars that will argue back and forth, up and down. Ramses is another thing. They usually say it was Ramses II, but which Ramses?
Yeah, exactly. Jacob Prash, Moriel, here we go. All of Moriel. What does Moriel think about AI YouTube teachings like Bible Made Clear or Plain Truth or the Bible Hidden? I'm not sure I've seen any of these, but maybe you guys have. AI YouTube teachings. What do you guys think?
If you were going to use AI as an systematic source of commentary for things like dating or the plethora of scholarly opinion on something, you can do that. It's no different than using a book or using a commentary. If you're going to use AI to go into things like lexical commentary, quick language translation for people who don't know Greek and Hebrew, it can be an effective tool. But the problem we're having is people are going to AI for the teaching itself. They're going to AI for the dogma, for the doctrine. They're not simply using it as a study aid concerning grammar or language or history or commentators' opinions. They're using it for something more than that. And that is wrong and dangerous.
Anybody's thoughts? Anybody else?
I would say that AI is, as Jacob has stated it, if it's a reference tool, if it sharpens what you already know, it's a great tool. If you're going to say, write a Bible study completely on this chapter of this verse, that's not good. You're literally handing over the power of the Holy Spirit to something that should be used at best as a reference. Yes. Kind of like it's kind of like having a digitized version of the church fathers' opinion and referencing only them rather than going back to the original text.
That's correct.
So are we actually live again now? Are we starting?
Oh, we've been like 2 questions in.
All right.
2 questions in. Yeah. Question for Jacob and Marco. May Day protests in LA and Portland, workers' rights and nationwide demonstration 2026 going on. Does this have a leg to stand on, Jacob? This is for demonstration for immigrants' rights, labor protection, and the high cost of living, LA and Portland.
Objectively, very little. Subjectively, very much. Again, you have a school system that exists for purposes of not of education, but indoctrination, not teaching people how to think, but telling them what to think. Anybody looking at the realities of the situation we're facing today concerning the controversies about ICE and things like this, well, Cesar Chavez, the founder of the farmers' unions, which was largely constituted composed of immigrant labor from Mexico who came legally. He was a vehement opponent of illegal immigration because he knew it would hurt the Mexican Americans who were here legally. But you ignore the actual history of the labor movement and you reverse it to fit the political narrative that exists now. It's based on ignorance. You don't understand what really happened. Or if you were to challenge them, show me one place where socialism has ever given a high standard of living and has not been a transition into some kind of state control of enterprise virtual communism or communism that has not resulted in oppression of the workers and a very low standard of living and an even lower standard of personal freedom. Show me an exception. Show me one place where it was worked. They can't show you that. But they've never been taught that reality in schools. They've only been taught what to think, not how to think. This is all a reflection of the failed school systems, the stinking garbage teachers unions on both sides of the Atlantic, who are just abysmal failures, and the educational bureaucracy, which is there for purposes of political and social engineering, not for purposes of training the next generation workforce or to be active citizens in a viable democracy. It is a product of a failed school system and a failed educational establishment, and damnably worthless and socially counterproductive teachers unions that are nothing more than political campaign funds for left-wing Democrat political candidates anyway. That's what it is. These young people don't know how to think. They've never been trained how to think. They've only been told what to think. When you confront them with the real evidence, they cannot respond to it. They don't know how. You can go on YouTube and you can see journalists asking questions and quoting left-wing politicians or quoting Democrats and saying, what do you think of this? Letting the people thinking it was coming from Donald Trump or from a conservative or whatever, a Republican or whatever. Oh, that's disgraceful. But when you tell them Bill Clinton or Barack Obama said it, they have no response. When you point out to them that Barack Obama, not Donald Trump, holds the record for deportations of illegal immigrants, they have no response. They don't know how to think. They've only been told what to think. So objectively, no, it fails, it dies. Subjectively, it has legs. People have been taught what to think, not how to think, and they've been conditioned to think with their emotions, not with their brains.
Yeah, for the most part, this is no doubt just a grift. LA and Portland, I mean, might as well say exactly what it is. This is the epicenter of a lot of these things. So I'm not surprised that it's there. And a lot of people don't support it that are actually working adults and things like that. You have these young kids coming out of high school, coming to college that are going to be fomenting into this and trying to figure out that there's some kind of great humanitarians because they're asking for this. Most Hispanics that I know, Christians that I know, don't support this because we know what it was like. I grew up in a communist country. I grew up in a socialist. I know exactly what this is. And it never, and will never work because of the godlessness and the anti-human concepts of Marxism. By the way, it was Mark's birthday this week, Jacob. So maybe we can send him a present, you know.
He's buried up at Highgate Cemetery in London. I've seen his grave. Remember what Winston Churchill said? He went from being a political liberal in his youth to being a conservative. And Churchill said, anyone who's not a liberal at the age of 20 doesn't have a heart. Anyone who's not a conservative at the age of 40 doesn't have a brain. Well, he was certainly.
No, you're absolutely right. So these things, although the media will blow them up to be this is some kind of liberation, look how they're standing up against it. It's localized and hopefully doesn't grow any more than that. But a lot of people are just angry and upset the way things are being done. But the reality of it is the Democrats did this a long time ago and just, revisionist history. Nobody remembers it. And we just keep, kicking the can down the road, but something needs to be done. So I don't think there's going to have much of a leg if especially if these things keep going. If these things keep going in terms of the economy.
When people on the left and when the black community particularly have been and the youth have been conditioned to identify political conservatism or the Trump administration with the history of Jim Crow, slavery, and the Klan, oblivious to the fact that Jim Crow, slavery, and the Klan were the products of the Democratic Party. It's just complete historical revisionism. But they've only been taught what to think, not how to think.
Yeah, I'm glad one thing. I'm glad that now younger people and my age group as well are now finally for the first time associating Nazism and skinheads and that kind of racism
But
to the left.
socialism,
Yeah,
yes.
rather than right, because it's always been, oh, these are extreme right wing. You see political guys like Biden and Obama. These are extreme right wing. The KKK and all this stuff. But in reality, they've always been associated with the left in terms of racism and how they,
Hitler was a socialist. The Nazis were a
yeah,
socialist party, national
yeah,
socialist work parties. That's what it meant. Like this guy Plattner in Maine, he is the
yeah,
Democratic nominee with a
yeah,
Nazi tattoo on his
yeah,
chest.
yeah,
Yeah, and Schumer is endorsing him. A
yeah.
Jew is endorsing a Nazi.
He's had it
And
for
the only
20 years, Jim.
alternative, the only alternative is that super rhino on steroids, Susan Collins. Now,
Yeah,
what do you
yeah,
want?
yeah.
Evil
I
or
know.
more evil? Bad or
Yeah.
worse? What a
That
choice.
That guy Graham had it has had it for 20 years and he finally admitted, well, I don't know. I didn't even know what it was. He says he walked into a barber shop one time and he saw it and he got inspired to do it and he never really thought about it. So I don't believe him for one bit. But now that he's been quick and he hasn't even apologized for anything like that. He's like, what? What? I
No.
didn't even know what this was. Complete craziness. Jacob, Bridget Gabriel. It's platforming a Republican Muslim, Dr. Zundi Jazer, candidate for congressional district number 4 in Arizona. We love Bridget, but why would she and TPUSA platform these charlatans?
I know Bridget. I did a conference with her. Bridget speaks Hebrew. She actually speaks Hebrew as well as Arabic and English. And I do like her. She's not a believer. She is accepting of conservative evangelical political positions and things like this. She's not a believer from the time I've spent talking to her, but I do like her personally and agree with her politically. I think she is trying to say that there are this minority of Muslims who are not radical, who do not accept a jihadist position or a fundamentalist position or a Sharia position, and she thinks she can somehow uh, undermine or mitigate against radical Islam by supporting moderate ones. I don't think she can be successful in doing that, but it has been my own complaint that more of the so-called moderate Muslims, and there's not that many, I think their numbers are overstated, but the ones who are moderate Muslims, and I know some, it has been my complaint that they're not speaking up more and saying more. So she has found one who is, and she's going with him. She sees him as somebody who can go against radical Islam the way Anwar Sadat went against the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, okay, until they eventually killed him. That's how she sees it. That's her particular point of view.
Yeah, just aligning ourselves with anybody that they can find to go against radical Islam. That's probably the
Correct.
case. That's probably what they're trying to do.
Yes.
Jacob, does Jesus leave before he returns? Does Jesus leave before he returns? And I don't understand the question. Isn't the rapture Jesus leaving with his bride? Then later Jesus returns with his bride?
Okay, we have to understand something. A distinction must always be made between the aerial return of Jesus and the terrestrial return of Jesus. We meet the Lord in the air at the rapture and resurrection. He does not physically return to the earth. It happens in the sky, it happens in the air. Okay, when he comes back with his saints to establish the Messianic kingdom and his feet stand on the Mount of Olives, that will be the terrestrial return. First comes the aerial return, which is the rapture and resurrection. Then comes the terrestrial return. His feet will stand upon the earth. I know my Redeemer liveth, and his feet will take a stand upon the earth on the last day. Even with my own eyes shall I see God. That is prophesied in the book of Job, of
Go.
course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. Jacob, did Augustine of Hippo start the foundations of Roman Catholicism? Thank you.
he was pivotal in its ascent, but it was not him originally. He was not the absolute harbinger of it. It was those who influenced him, particularly Ambrose of Milan and Cyprian of Carthage. Cyprian of Carthage and Ambrose of Milan both had a very strong influence on Augustine. And although he renounced his Manichaeism, he still appears to have kept some Manichaean philosophy. So that would be the third, this kind of Greek dualism called Manichaeism. Those would be the three primary influences on Augustine. He crystallized and consolidated the influences of his predecessors who influenced him in a climate where Christianity went from being a Judeo-Christian theology to a Hellenistic philosophy. He Platonized the church. He also he replaced biblical ecclesiology, the biblical model of the church, or not model, the biblical principles for the church, with political ones, okay, where it became the religion of the state. And he invented this false doctrine of the visible and invisible church. He was responsible for Roman Catholicism to a very large degree under the influences of the sacramentalist Cyprian and the Erastian, who believed the church should be a political institution, that is Ambrose of Milan. It is interesting to note that the Eastern Orthodox Church do not follow Augustine as a church father. They rather follow John Chrysostom, who has other issues. But tragically and unfortunately, the reformers, Luther, Calvin, Zwingli, the Anglicans, they all followed Augustine. They failed to restore apostolic Christianity, instead going back to the patristic Christianity of Augustine. That is why Protestantism has wound up in the spiritual sewer that it's in today. It goes back to the failure of the reformers to go back to the apostles. They went back to Augustine instead, particularly Calvin, but also Luther.
Very good. Jacob, do you believe that anti-Semitism is the same as not supporting Israeli governmental policies?
I think that one can legitimately disagree with the policies of the Israeli government. Many Israelis disagree with the policies of the Israeli government. But when you attack Zionism, saying that the nation has no right to exist, that the Jews do not have a right to live in their own homeland, nobody would say that the Maoris don't have a right to be in New Zealand, or the Irish have no right to be in Ireland, or the Apaches have no right to be in Arizona. But when you say a Jew has no right to be in what is archaeologically verified to be their ancient homeland, which the archaeology confirms the biblical history as well, when you say that, now you have to go back to what Martin Luther King wrote. Dr. Martin Luther King correctly wrote that anti-Zionism is merely the current expression and manifestation of anti-Semitism. Martin Luther King was absolutely right. Martin Luther King was pro-Zionist.
Yeah, I'm going to go to.
And he understood anti-Zionism. He understood anti-Zionism was anti-Semitism.
Very good. Elon, your thoughts on that question? Just wanted to get your thoughts on that question.
Oh, you mean is anti-Zionism the same as anti-Semitism, or disagreeing with our government?
Yeah, I'll read it again. No worries. I'll read it again. Do you believe that anti-Semitism is the same as not supporting Israeli governmental policies?
No, no. I mean, as Yaakov said, really, not everything that comes out of the Knesset is something that you want to. I mean, there are sometimes some policies that come out of especially when it's been left-leaning. I mean, for example, the legislation in this country on abortion.
Yeah.
I would categorically disagree with that. Absolutely, I think it's horrifying.
Absolutely, 100%.
That doesn't make me an anti-Semite. I live here. I'm married to a Jewish woman, so so to try and equate the policies of the government with anti-Semitism, it would be going too, it would be too much. But
Yeah.
I think Yaakov gave a very good answer on that, really. A lot, but what happens is that people they look at some of what's going on. They don't like what they see. When Jews actually do take the time to defend themselves after years of being bombarded or whatever, and they use that as a pretext for hating all Jews. It never stops with disagreeing with, our government's policies here. Instead, it goes straight to attacking Jews in the diaspora who have no control over what goes on over here.
That's right.
That's when you start to see that those people that march around like Shabna Mahmood in the UK, demanding, cleansing of the land from the river to the sea, making it Jew free, this kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's they just use the whole current conflict as a pretext to vent their hatred of Jews.
I've seen this. Sort of it's a very confusing thought in terms of what people have. They look at the governmental policies of Israel, and obviously some I don't agree with, and I've been vociferous about it, voice my opinion on things, and but that does not make us anywhere near anti-Jew or anti-Semitic. One example would be, Elon, you and I talked about the gay pride parade, and there's one in Jerusalem. Yeah. And it's gonna have they're gonna have a big one. What is it called by the Dead Sea? It's the one
Pride Land.
Pride Land, yeah. Completely against it. Does that mean that we're anti-Jews? We anti-Zionists? No, of course not. That doesn't. But we disagree with it, and we call it out for sin and what it is, and unrighteousness, and pride and arrogance, and God's judgment will fall on those who practice such things. So that is a warning, and that is a very real. That's a reality that we need to all approach. That not everything the Israeli government does needs to be approved, rubber stamped and approved, because ultimately, Jake, I don't know if you agree with this. The people that hate Israel, let's just put people that are blind to just anything that Israeli government does, they don't account for the fact that the time of Jacob's trouble is coming. The time of Jacob's trouble is going to come, and God is going to correct them and lead them. But those who are against Israel forget the fact that it says that all of Israel will be saved, that he will forgive their sins and remember their sins no more. So there is that vacuum that people don't consider the fact that not everything that they do is right, but God has a plan for them, and he will forgive their sins. If they come back to the Messiah, he will relent of punishing them and dealing with them, and all of Israel would be saved. And that's unfortunately, a lot of people just go one extreme to the other and don't hold the balanced view of it. Jacob, go ahead.
So I was going to very quickly add in there, it's no surprise that many of these people who have a vehement hatred for Jews all arise either from Muslim backgrounds or from the extreme left. These two things always go together, because the left is an evil, godless religion, just like, it really is. It's a religious belief, and a real hatred of God is embodied in most leftist politicians and people that support those positions. They have a real hatred of God. So they hate the God of Israel, so they hate the Jews as well. The two go hand in hand.
That's right.
I agree with you, Lone, completely. But to the third, I would add a third. People who are really, really very traditional Roman Catholics.
Yeah,
traditional Roman Catholicism historically has an anti-Semitic ethos to it. From the Spanish Inquisition to whatever else, there's that history. And I think it is an element in what you're seeing happening in Spain now and in Ireland now. It is the cultural impact of Roman Catholicism that causes so much Jew hatred in both Spain and in the Republic of Ireland.
Yeah. And to just quote,
she became a Catholic. Look what she did.
Yeah. And to just quote the Jeremiah 30, but he, Jacob, will be saved out of it. So the time of Jacob's trouble, but he will be saved out of it. And the gifts and calling of God are irrevocable. So you have to hold those things in tension to realize, that yes, Israel is rebelling against God, but God has a plan. God has a plan for them. You can't dismiss that. And unfortunately,
Another one is Sam Shimon.
to
As
the
soon
other.
as he became a Roman Catholic, look what he did.
Yeah.
He went against Israel.
Jacob, please give me a biblical reference to that we are not in the 70th week of Daniel.
Okay. In Daniel chapter 9, the Antichrist will have to make a treaty. Okay. He'll have to confirm a treaty. It's debated as to what that means. He must be on site for the 7 years to commence. And while there are many antichrists, and he may well be alive, I don't know who he is, and I don't think anybody knows for sure who he is, despite the speculations on the internet. He's going to be much too clever in disguising who he is until the Lord reveals him. So that would absolutely be one. Also, when you move into Revelation chapter to the horseman, okay, in Revelation chapter 6, the one on the white horse is the Antichrist. That is where tribulation begins, the megathalipson. And again, where is he? Who is he? He comes as an angel of light trying to counterfeit Jesus on the white horse in Revelation 19. He comes trying to counterfeit or pre-counterfeit Christ. Where is he? Who is he? Elon, would you care to comment?
As to why we're not in the 70th week? Yeah. No temple.
Yeah, he has to make this treaty with the temple. Yes.
No temple, no sacrifices. We're not in the 70th week.
Correct.
That's really it. You know,
that is bound up with the Antichrist.
Yeah,
yes,
it's all connected together.
What was interesting when we hit the lockdown years of 2020, a lot of people were saying, "Oh, the seals are open because of the virus and all the stuff that was going on." And look what happened. It came to nothing. We weren't in the seals. We weren't in the 70th week of Daniel. Many people were, complaining that, oh, you guys are blind to the reality. And we said the exact same things. No Antichrist, no temple, no sacrifice, same thing. Yeah. And there's still none of that. So it didn't happen 6 years ago. And that was 6 years ago. Imagine that. Same thing now. Yep. So same answers we gave back in 2020 where people began to speculate because of the lockdowns and the COVID vaccines and all this stuff. So anyway, Jacob, is there any biblical basis for the tradition that Elijah may one day appear to drink the fifth cup at the Passover Seder?
That is purely a rabbinic convention that was post-biblical, Elijah's cup. There is a biblical basis to believe Elijah will come again. The Old Testament canon closes with it in the 5th chapter of the book of Malachi. But setting the extra place at the table with the Elijah cup, which has become a game you play with small children virtually at a Paschal Seder, no, that has no biblical basis in and of itself.
Okay. Last question, Jacob, and this is one that we talked about today. The local elections show that the UK wants change. Is the political right in the UK looking to Christ?
Elements of it are, but only in the sense that Margaret Thatcher had one of her advisors was a born-again Christian, Dr. John Delaney, and another one of her advisors was, I think his name was Stephen Myers, a Jewish believer. She had evangelical advisors, and she was sympathetic to evangelical concerns, but only in that sense. The sense of holding traditional family values, traditional social moral values, and things of that nature. There are elements of British conservatism that see evangelicism or the gospel as commensurate with those kinds of values and political concerns. I don't see it as something that is deeply ingrained in the quest for a revival or an outpouring of God's Spirit or something like that. Similar to Donald Trump. Donald Trump sees the evangelicals as a political lobby that he has sympathies to in terms of their values, but he's not a believer. Well, it's the same in Britain.
Yeah, unfortunately, that is the case, but we can pray and we can influence the government in which the Lord has put us in there. So praise the Lord. Davey, I'm going to have you close us out today. Some words of encouragement, all the hysteria, all the pain, all the craziness that is going on, especially on social media. We're 6 years removed from what happened in 2020. Maybe we learned nothing. Maybe we learned something. But just final words as we close out today.
Yeah. Well, it does seem like we're going to go through certain things again. It looks like, okay, this is going to be take two. Sequels are never as good. But look, in all seriousness, what the enemy intends for our harm, the Lord can use for good. And as bad as what it was, the lockdowns and everything, it has changed the world for good. It has changed the world, and not for the good, but the Lord did bring some good out of it. I kind of think it. We hadn't heard of Zoom or anything like that before. That online ministry kind of exploded during that time. So the Lord can always, bring good out of even the worst of situations like that. So I think we just need to keep our eyes focused on the Lord, keeping His word. His word is going to be our lifeline, basically. It's our best prevention against deception. One thing I was reminded of before when we were talking about looking back at 2020 and all the rest of it, I know often when I go to Ballarat, I usually go to Lake Wendouree, and usually just to have lunch or, a cuppa, that kind of thing. And I have noticed people's attitudes have changed. Years ago, you would say g'day. You'd be saying g'day to complete strangers. Everybody would greet one another and that kind of thing. Now everybody has just become so self-focused. They only think of themselves. No one's saying g'day to one another. But that you kind of expect from the world. We have to be the light. We have to be the light in the darkness. Someone once said, believers are the only Bible some people are going to read. So we need to reflect God's light and love to a lost and dying world. So keep your eyes on Christ. He'll guide us through. He delights in bringing his people through situations. And we need not fear. We need not to give in to all the... for lack of a better term, I'll use the term the media often use now, the fear porn. We don't need to cave in or give into that. Jesus told us we're not to be troubled, we're not to fear. He will never leave or forsake us. He will be with us to the end. So keep your eyes on Christ. Love one another. Let his light and love shine through you to others. We need to be the voice of truth, because there's not many people speaking truth nowadays. So if they're not going to hear truth from the media or anyone else, we need to be his voice. So I just pray the Lord blesses and keeps you all, and he keeps us all faithful until he comes. And until next week, God bless you all. Marco, back to you.
Thank you, Davey. And it is Mother's Day weekend. So go and love your mom. If she's still with you, love your mom. Share the gospel with her if she's not saved. If she is saved, you are a blessed person. And cherish and adore mom. And of course, if you have children, your wife, make sure they acknowledge and love their mother. It's a wonderful thing to have a saved mom. So God bless you guys. And all the moms, happy Mother's Day weekend. The Lord bless you. And we'll see you again next week.
Many people wander asking the same question. Why can't they find like-minded believers? They search to and fro for refreshment, fellowship, people that will understand how they cherish the Word of God. The institutions that slowly were corrupted year after year until it was completely unrecognizable from the beginning. Same thing plays out. There's nothing new under the sun, as it seems. Yet, here we are. Instead of brick and mortar, cathedral, sometimes the best places we can be is like it was in the first century, in homes breaking bread, no longer hiding our faith, meeting in secret, trying to survive, but boldly proclaiming the truth. letting God's light shine forth through us in our deeds and our prayers. If you can't find a church, it's hard to find fellowship. We will pray for you, and know this, the Lord will lead you to a place where you can be refreshed. We are here. Memorial Ministries wants to continue the work that was started so long ago, declaring the good news of Jesus Christ and defending right doctrine.